All right. All right. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining our monthly digital reunion or pre-union as we are calling it. This is fourth in the series and we will continue until we meet on campus. And few have asked about meeting on campus. It's still not clear. IIT Bombay is going to take that decision probably towards the end of the year, maybe October, November. So it's still up in the air. And anyway, so today's topic is education. But before I go there, I did want to share sad news from campus. It's in the times we are living in. One of the professors, Rinti Banerjee of biosciences, she passed away due to COVID complication. That's the first sort of a COVID-related loss that IIT Bombay has experienced. And if you remember Rangan Banerjee, Professor Rangan Banerjee, who was mechanical engineering. Some of us may have taken courses with them. He was also HOD dean. That's her elder brother. So both brother and sister were teaching at IIT Bombay. Anyway, so we wish their families and pray for their families. And with that, let's get started with today's topic. Anurag Sharma, who is hostile to Aero, he's going to be the moderator. He has taken a lot of effort. We have a distinguished panelist, as well as we have a couple of current or just graduated IITB students who joined us. So thanks everyone for taking the time out, and Anurag, over to you.
All right, thanks Vinay. So just to correct one thing, the most effort I made for this is to choose this Aurora Borealis background. What we decided was I checked with everybody and most of the people said, okay, it's best to keep it free flowing. So not too much of discussions beforehand. We will do it mostly in a question and answer style. I will ask questions and people will answer. We have 6 speakers, including Akshat, and we have around an hour, 15 minutes before we go to questions and answers and open mic. So let's keep it around 10 minutes. Let's try to keep it 10 minutes per speaker. And what I request is, let's keep answers to questions to the point and short so that we can cover more ground. I mean, we all want to hear in detail from everybody, but hopefully we'll do that in the reunion, the actual reunion. So with that, let's get started. The first person we have is Mandar Deshmukh. Mandar, you please unmute yourself so we can introduce
you.
Hi,
Anurag. Hi, everyone.
So Mandar is from H2. He was my wingmate, actually. H2 engineering physics. Then he went to Cornell University, did a PhD from there in physics. Yeah. Then he went to Harvard for his postdoc. Now he's currently a researcher and professor at TIFR. And he didn't want to harp on this point, but I do want to mention that he got an award for his research, the Bhatnagar Award, which is a very highly acclaimed award. He got that in 2015, but no more. He said that let's not divert attention from the topic that we want to discuss. So Mandar, first, can you give us a very short intro about your research topic and your professional journey?
Yeah, so the area of my research is experimental nanoscience, which is sort of at the big picture level. But what I really focus on is studying how electrons flow through structures which are confined in one dimension or more. So imagine you have a sheet of graphite, which is graphene, which is only 1 atom thick. So you just peel off 1 layer of graphite, which is graphene. And one of the things that we do is study how electrons flow in a sheet of carbon, which is only 1 atom thick. This is a very hot area in condensed matter physics, which is sort of the area where I work in. What we do is make electronic devices in TIFR and study them. Often studying these involves making complex devices and studying them at low temperatures. And the low temperature part is primarily to suppress other sort of annoying aspects, which is, vibration of atoms, which increases the resistance. So that's sort of a glimpse of what we do, but we are focused on making new kind of electronic devices, which tell us something more about how electrons flow differently than conventional electronic devices. Okay, so that's my spiel about what we do. So I have been here at TIFR since 2006 January, and kind of it's been an exciting journey. It's kind of been at times been kind of rough, but it's a very rewarding sort of journey for me personally. Having set up a lab from scratch when I arrived at TIFR, and in terms of resources, there is actually no dearth of resources at many institutions. Certainly at TIFR, I didn't have any problem with funding, and the funding is very competitive, comparable to some of the top US universities. The students are an important aspect, and one of the things that kind of keeps me at TIFR is that they come from very remote places in India, but they're among the smartest guys. And I don't, I mean, I say this without any exaggeration. They're really, really motivated and driven, comparable to my classmates at Cornell Graduate School. So that's basically the brief answer to Anurag's question.
Okay, Mandar, do you only do research, or do you have to teach courses also at TIFR?
Okay, so that's a good question. So TIFR does not have undergrads, only has graduate students, PhD students, no masters either in physics. So we teach only the PhD students. So I teach one semester a year, one course. So the teaching load is quite less compared to, say, a professor at IIT.
But these are highly specific courses, I am assuming. So how much preparation goes into these courses?
Yeah, so these are often specialized, but we also, we take students after BSc or MSc. We take some outstanding BSc students as well straight into the PhD program. So we do have to teach them some basic physics courses for graduates, graduate school level. So we do teach basic physics courses like electrodynamics, quantum mechanics, but often we do teach very sort of frontier areas of research kind of thing. So they are specialized. Many are specialized, but we also give them very basic foundation, because after you finish your PhD, there's really no way for you to sort of formally take courses. The learning continues, but formal coursework sort of, you don't have too many opportunities.
All right. So Mandar, we'll go into some, given that you have worked in US and India, and you've done your PhD in Cornell and your undergrad in IIT, we'll consider some contrast. So what is the biggest contrast you found between IIT and Cornell and Harvard?
So I'll sort of compare at a level which is, say, a US research institution or university. And did you say, should I compare with IIT or TIFR?
Whatever contrast you want to draw, that's fine with me. Whatever you want to.
Yeah. So I think one of the one of the main differences, what makes top US universities, or because I'm not dissing European system, but I know only the US system and the Indian. So my comparison is kind of direct, is I think, some of the top universities have a kind of a very enriched ecosystem. The professor is good, but I think the students are really outstanding because they get some of the best. And there's a constant circulation of traffic through seminars and interaction. So you have an enriched environment, but you have a lot of interaction with your peers who are leaders in the research and globally. One of the issues in India is that we are not at the center of the ecosystem. So the traffic of intellectual traffic of top researchers coming through India is limited. Okay, so you have to go out of the way to make sure that you attract people to come, and that makes a huge difference. You'd say, oh, we have internet, and you have, in physics particularly, you have archives, which is basically publication, people put up their work on archive. So that's your claim for priority. So you do updated in terms of research, but you still, kind of miss the fact that you have 1:1 contact with researchers. So that's one major difference. That's kind of interaction with leaders, in the field. The other part is, I think, sometimes the mundane things of, this is not a sob story, but just to give you a contrast, can be a nuisance. Like, sort of like you want to send a research sample via DHL to US, and the DHL guy is worse than a Sarkari Babu. He's going to essentially wants your Janpatri for a KYC, and it takes half a day for you to kind of argue with the DHL guy who's ostensibly trying to make money. You lose a lot of your time and energy in nonsense dealing with them to get the thing shipped. Whereas, this is kind of relatively, trivial. You just give it to the mailing section, it goes away. So this is an example of small things which kind of become irritating. So this kind of thing dissipates some of the energy. And so there are situations even in IIT and where the sort of these dissipative forces are substantial. The last point I would say is that in general, funding is patchy in India. It was very good in TIFR. It has gone down a little bit, but you would get a grant approved in a year, but you have to wait for the money to come in about 6 to 12 months, which is a little bit annoying. I think it's much faster. Delivery of money, once it's approved in the US system, is much faster. So that's sort of 3 points that I'd like to contrast on.
One more point I want to particularly ask, what do you see is the level of motivation of students or young researchers in India compared to US?
So, okay, that's a very good question. So without, again, sort of tooting the horn of my students, I find the motivation level of students very high. They have
in India,
most of the students.
In India, TFR, you mean?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's also true for IITs because they, most of the students say in physics come from tier 2, 3 cities and rural areas. And these are very good guys. They're fundamental. I mean, TIFR's entrance exam is very, high bar, and there's an interview. So these are very good guys. Their motivation level is high. They are not very polished, so, compared to, say, an IIT undergrad sort of, and these are not polished guys. So their, presentation skills are not fancy, but their motivation level is high. If I compare to US, even, my graduate school class, I would say international students, many of the American students are motivated, but the motivation level of going through, kind of weird ups and downs of academia of international students is much higher than an American student. Okay. They will, Chinese, Indian, Russian motivation levels are very high. They want tough problems and they're not deterred by it. Mm-hmm. So I would say, at least the students that I have interacted with and I have mentored, they come from very remote places. They're kids who, who I have mentored. They have to travel, by bus, by foot to reach their home place when they go home. But they are, quite top in terms of their physics understanding. So their motivation level for excelling is very high.
And do a lot of these students and these researchers stay in physics, or do they go out to the industry, or stay in research, or do they move to industry?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So most of physics students will stay in academia in some form or other. I have had something like 8 PhD students graduate since I've been around. So 2 of them are in industry. One works with Seagate in Ireland, and the other works with ASML in Netherlands, which is a semiconductor manufacturing equipment manufacturer. And others are academics, professors in India, one in France. So there's a distribution, but the kind of work we do is at the interface of technology and science and electrical engineering. So it has opportunities to work in industry, but typically in physics, more large fraction stay in academia.
That's good to hear. Okay, Jindal has a question, and this is the last one for you, Mandar, because unfortunately we are running out of time.
Yeah.
Jindal asked, how effective has the network which you developed at Cornell and Harvard been for your research?
I mean, I guess I haven't leveraged the network per se, because I have changed, sort of evolved in a direction. My research is quite different from what I used to do for my PhD and my postdoc, which is sort of sort of have taken newer and newer problems. So it has been beneficial, the network, but I haven't really kept on collaborating with US academics. In general, the problem with US researchers, I mean, again, broadly, is that if you're not in constant touch with them or meeting them frequently, they're not very good collaborators. They'll find a new collaborator which is close by in US or Europe, and they'll move on. So so the short answer to his question is, I haven't really milked that network. People know me from what I've done before, but I haven't really kept on collaborating with the same people.
Okay, I said last question, but Mandar,
can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, sorry. One question I have for Mandar. You and your wife both are professors. She's a professor at IIT, and you are a researcher at TFR. Do you have a pecking order at home depending upon your citation index or something like that?
No, I think for preserving sanity, the best thing is to not bring those things up for discussion at home.
Okay. All right. I cut somebody off. Who was?
Yeah.
Who was
can I ask a question? Yeah, this is Rakesh. I'm just curious. You said that a lot of the kids coming from like second tier and rural areas are very good at the fundamentals in physics. I'm just curious to know how come, like, do they have good teachers in those areas? How is it that they are very good at the fundamentals?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So I think it's personal ambition and motivation, but one is also tradition. Okay, so this is in a lot of students in physics, disproportionate, normalized in physics come from West Bengal. Okay, that's true in mathematics also, but in certainly West Bengal, like as a fraction of the class, a large fraction is from West Bengal. So one is that they have a long tradition of people coming from remote villages who have done PhD at TIFR or IIT, and they have done well. So there is a kind of trajectory for that they have an example that they can emulate, some role models. So they have good teachers. So there are fewer colleges which have a tradition of physics teaching or pure sciences, I would say. But the students themselves are very motivated in terms of their own learning, and curiosity is very high. So it's, it's their own personal, many of them have taught themselves many things besides learning from their students directly. So that's the answer to your question.
And I think, Mandar, we'll have to stop at that for you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I wish we can talk more, but maybe in December. Okay. Thanks a lot for answering the questions. And now we move to Nandan. Nandan Sinha.
Anurag,
Hi,
can you hear
Nandan
me?
Sinha is a professor at IIT Madras, Aerospace Engineering. He was my batchmate in IIT. We did our aerospace BTech together. Then he did his master's and PhD at IIT Bombay and
Yeah, masters at IIT Kanpur. Okay,
IIT
and,
Kanpur. So Nandar, give us the same thing. Give us a brief intro of your professional career as well as your research area.
okay, thank you, Anurag, and hi everyone. So nice to see a lot of people here. So after my BTech, I moved to IIT Kanpur for my masters, and then I went back to do PhD with my BTP guide at IIT Bombay. So like I admired him, and I joined him back for PhD. And after PhD, I was a postdoc in Germany, uh, uh, in Darmstadt, where I spent about 3 years. So mainly teaching and no, doing some research in vibrations of mechanical systems. And that was so it was about 2005 when I was looking for position, and some guy visited from IIT Madras, and he just wanted me to come back, and so I just took it. So I landed in at IIT Madras in 2006. So I joined IIT Madras in 2006 in April. So it's about 15 years now. My area of research is on aerial vehicle autonomy. So we are developing algorithms of our own. Okay, so for uh, six-job vehicle, control autonomy. So uh, and I've been fortunate in the sense that probably I was the first here, okay, who started this UAV business, and I see that now it's like all over everywhere, and everybody is wanting to do something in UAV or so. So initially, the flying these vehicles are not so easy. Okay, so you need the space and infrastructure and all those things. And luckily the drone came out as an easier option, okay, to start with, and we started flying drones in about 2006, and and it caught up, and you can see the drones everywhere nowadays. And so I moved on from drones to UAVs. I mean, we also build UAVs and we flew, and I started looking at how I can sort of embed my own control algorithms into these UAVs, and that's still a work in progress. It's actually not ended. And in the meanwhile, this online teaching business was coming up, and then I plunged into that. I also made a video of a course. Okay, and actually it hasn't come out well, but that was quite in the beginning, and but a lot of people come and tell me that it helps them. So mainly people from Air Force, so they're coming and telling me that
What course was this, Nandan?
yeah, this was flight dynamics.
Okay.
So yeah, so people are watching, and actually there is I know from several other colleges that they have been running this video for their courses. Okay, so everywhere I go, people try to identify me.
And you're also a published academic author, right? You wrote a book with AKN.
So we wrote actually two books. One basic book, which is called Elementary Flight Dynamics, and the second book is Advanced Flight Dynamics. Both of these are published from USA. And just this year, we have finished the second edition of Elementary Flight Dynamics, which is now being published from both UK and US. And we have another thing about this book. It's being translated in Chinese. So
Okay.
yeah, so it's been a quite rewarding journey. Okay, I just loved everything about IITM. Okay, of course, no IITB also. So it's like being in IIT. It's not different from IIT Bombay. Okay, so we get this student from the same JE, and I think for me it has been a very satisfying journey.
Okay, so Nandan, first is you were a student and now you're a prof. So do you have sympathy for the other side in both roles?
I think no, Mandar probably would agree. This side is tougher. Okay, being student was an easier thing. Okay, so when you write exams, okay, as student, you don't realize how much effort a professor is putting up into making those questions paper. Okay, and no, and everything like lectures and all those things. So it's much tougher than being student and just going writing exam. And so
I was also talking about not just work-wise, but we were very troublesome at times. And professors, I remember some
right.
professors were more patient than others. So what category are you? Which side of the spectrum are you on?
Okay, so far I haven't shorted in the class at anyone. Okay, so and no, I think I'm more aloof. Okay, people come talk to me, and I'm sitting in office, and then I mean, not the kind that we got, no, who used to bombard us, right? So people were famous then, right? I don't know what I am here, but yeah, people were
You were
very.
also a warden of a hostel at times, right?
Yeah, I was warden of two hostels here. Okay, I mean, it was split in, my tenure was split in, two, I mean, 1.5 years in each hostel, so 3 years.
So
Yes.
one
And
question I have is how much of your work, and I know from other professors, I have heard their answers, but I want to know from you, from you, how much of your time goes into teaching versus research versus academic versus administration, I mean.
uh, uh, teaching is 3 hours a week, okay, but that is one thing that I want to crack in the beginning itself. Okay, and that is where I thought that making these videos would help me to also prepare this course particularly for once and all. Okay, and I worked really hard in the beginning to take care of that, so that my teaching efforts go down later, and it helped me a lot. So and that's how the book also came about. So I spent a lot of time initially in going through all the books and making notes, so that I can just walk in and then start taking classes. So at least it has worked for a couple of courses, and then you have all the time to do your research and do anything else that you want. And people probably don't know. I mean, we do many things that are not sort of visible to outsiders, okay, or probably even to students, right? We are engaged in conducting exams, right? GATE, JE, and JAM, and all those things. So, a lot of people, a lot of faculty, play a very important role in all those exams, and then on the hostel sector, and then the teaching. Okay, you have now with the research number of research students going up, you also have this added uh, you know load of participating in their review committees. Okay, and plus you are also supposed to do research, right? You need to graduate your PhD, you need to write papers, and all those things. So yeah, come again. I actually looks like I forgot it.
How much time was how much time do you spend in administration and committees and all that?
A lot of time. Okay, so I would say so almost like 30-40%. 30-40%. So it's like throughout the year you have to be in one committee or the other.
How often does IIT Madras, I don't know about, I mean, I don't know whether you know about other IITs, but how often is the curriculum upgraded or reviewed?
Uh, every 10 years. Every 10 years.
Okay.
So yeah, we did that recently. So I mean, after I came, they did, I think, after 10 years must be around 2016 or 17. So they have
And what is the breakdown now, Nandan? At our time, it was majority in undergrad, it was majority 4-year BTech. I believe the majority now is 5-year dual degree courses.
no, not really. It's like 80% BTechs and I think 70. It's like in a class of 60, you have about 12 or 14 dual degree students.
Okay.
But many of these BTechs who do well, okay, they want to move to dual degree.
So
Okay.
it's allowed. You can upgrade.
Yes, yes. So
Okay.
and the good students actually do that.
Okay.
They want to
And
stay.
how much has the attitude towards further studies changed? At our time, it was majority people wanted to apply for further studies. What's the case now?
I think it went down. Okay, last few years. Okay, but I see that bright students actually want to go abroad for higher studies. So
Okay, so that means I was not bright even back then.
I, I am surprised that I really when I look around, okay, I find it very difficult to find people from our batch who have taken academic positions. But I look at 95 or 97, I find them plenty. Okay, I mean here itself at IIT Madras, I see from our own batch. I mean IITM graduates, a lot of them taken up academic positions. So it's a bit of a surprise for our department, our batch actually.
Sorry, my cat was troubling me. So, how's the quality of research students you get now? Are you happy with that?
Okay, that's a bit of a sort of what do you say, flip side of. So I can tell you about my own students. Okay, so I mean, of course, we don't get our own students doing PhD with us. Okay, so uh, uh, and if we land up with us for some regions, like I had a guy who was doing masters at MIT. Okay, and he was a graduate from here, mechanical engineering. Okay, and then he went to MIT, and then he left MIT, and then came back. He was a local guy, so he may have some other reasons for to join me. So he was extremely intelligent guy. Okay, so my life was much easier. So other students are coming from second tier colleges. Okay, and engineering colleges in this country are not at par with the IITs. Okay, so you know that, right? So uh, even IITs, I mean, some of them are good, but I mean, you cannot for sure uh, uh, say how. I mean, they are probably not motivated. They just want to be in IIT because they miss the bus, and then so they want to take the experience. Anurag, I
So,
can't hear you.
yeah, is that statement that IITs tend to be better than other engineering colleges? Do you think that's true for all IITs? I mean, now we have around 20 IITs, right?
Uh, at least the first five IITs have been able to maintain their lead. Okay, I some private colleges are, I mean, private engineering colleges are trying to compete, and IITs are good. Okay, so I still feel that IITs are no. I won't say the same thing about other newer IITs because they do have dearth of faculties, and I don't know, without faculty how you can sort of match up with the older IIT established ones.
So
So
why do faculty not want to go to the newer IITs? Is it the locations? Is it that they want to be an established system? What is it?
it's primary the location, I would believe. I mean, I know, for me also it was very difficult. I mean, we had no choice. I know I did not want to go to Bombay, okay, for some reason, and we were looking. So IIT Madras was the only option because other than so as far as aero department is concerned, we have aero department in Kanpur and Kharagpur, right? So those two choices were completely ruled out, Kharagpur and Kanpur. And I didn't want to go to Bombay, so basically the only choice was IIT Madras.
Okay, now I think not many people know. Mandar mentioned it in the passing on the Signal Group once, but IITs are no longer primarily education institutions. Is that correct?
Right. So it's stretching, on the other side, we're trying to sort of also do good research. There are a lot of people actually doing fantastic research here.
How is that being done? How's that change being brought about by IITs? How do they incentivize research?
They don't incentivize. Okay. So you
Okay.
don't get anything for doing good research, but it's like self-driven. So if you
Okay.
want to be, you want to be recognized internationally, or so interesting thing that has happened recently. I mean, in our time, it was like very lean. Okay, so they were trying to fill up the faculty positions then, and the competition was less. But recently, you see a lot of people, coming from US, Stanford, MIT, Cornell, all the top-notch, colleges. People are coming back. So we have tough competition here now. So you see a lot of faculty applications. So it's like 30 for one position. So that kind, and that's remarkable.
So what is IIT Madras good at now? Which research area in aerospace?
IIT Madras Aerospace Department is known for the research on combustion.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think they're the front runner on that aspect. So a lot of students graduating from here in that field are also finding position in other IITs, and some have also gone abroad. So that is one area that IIT Madras Aero Department is taking.
One last question from my side. How have you seen the change in attitude of students' parents compared to our times?
That's a very interesting question. Our parents came and dropped dead at IIT Bombay, and they never saw us, right? Right? We used to pay some 60 rupees per minute to talk to our parents. I wouldn't want to waste that money. Okay. So nowadays, parents want to know which company is, which department actually is good for making more money. So which department your kid will join, and you can be assured that you will get a lot of money at the end of the course. So those questions.
Is money a big driving factor for choosing the department?
Choosing the department, I think so. I mean, students are there; they have to answer that. Yeah.
No, it's.
Yeah,
I mean, and I don't make any judgment on that. But is that the reality?
at least from the parents' side, I see that they are asking such questions during the counseling. Okay.
Okay.
And how that percolates into actually students joining the department. Okay, so I don't know how it works out. Yeah.
What would you like to do? What would you like to change for IIT faculty, if we could? What would you like to change?
I wish some of our own students, would stay back and work with us. Okay, do research with us. That is what I want, because most of the students were good, they will leave us. So that's where we are lagging, and probably that's where a lot of people struggle with the students. So I have a lot of hopes with IIT students. Okay, and actually a lot of them initially have worked with me, and then and that was the most interesting thing, that a lot of my research are based on what they left behind. Okay, and then on those problems I actually take PhD students and carry forward. So that way I feel that if they could stay back and do research here, because some of these students work on computational problems, and nowadays facilities are good here as well. I really fail to understand why they have to go to go abroad to do the same kind of research that they are doing here.
And is there increasing absorption of students in India in terms of from the industry now? I mean, with aerospace becoming a point of focus again, you'd see more companies opening up and hiring students?
Yes, yeah. So there are a lot of so this DD program that I was talking about is successful because they have a lot of demand in the industry. So you have all these MNCs now in India. So a lot of them get easily absorbed. So that's not a problem. For BTech students, there could be problems, but for DD students, there's no doubt of that.
That's good to hear, Nandan. And unfortunately, we are running out of time now.
Yeah, I have
Thanks
a
a lot
question.
for your, yeah, who was
Quick
that?
question.
Yeah,
Ambrish here.
yeah, Amrish, go ahead.
Yeah, Ambrish.
Hey, Nandan, I just wanted to get a feel from you. The only two aerospace companies that I know in India are ISRO and HAL. Are there many others in private sector? That's one question.
Yes,
Second
yes,
is,
yes.
how much
Yeah.
of collaboration do you guys have with ISRO and HAL in terms of research and your students getting employment there?
Okay, so ISRO is not the most favorable, most favorite place for our own students. Okay, so they kind of find it little like government kind of organization. Okay, and so they don't get to. I mean, it's an established organization, right? They don't want people to come there and because they feel that they're entertained and fiddle with their whatever is going on. So many of these students don't stay with ISRO. Okay, I know some of them personally who have gone there, spent 6 months or so, and then they left. So that is still there. About private industry, I think there are many companies nowadays. And some of these companies are like who survive on the odd short job from bigger companies, right? So Airbus, Boeing, and all these companies are there. Okay, and they're the company at the lower level which are supporting these bigger companies, and so industry is there now. Okay, industry is there. So
Industry is there. Amrish, I'll talk with you separately about this if you want.
right.
But now we have to move to our next speaker, otherwise we'll overshoot our deadline by a lot. So Nandan, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All the best for your research. Okay, next we have somebody whose nickname in IIT came back to him when he had kids. Let's talk to Daddy. Ranjan Goel. Please unmute yourself.
Hi,
Yes.
hi guys. Loving this
Hi.
rare opportunity to speak to friends from 25 years back.
Yeah, so Daddy is different from our two speakers so far. He is in the domain of primary and pre-primary education, but actually the whole K-12 spectrum. Let me ask him to explain what he does and how he got into this.
Yeah, thanks, Anurag. And so, as different from our researchers and professors, even though I'm in education, but I don't have much to do with teaching myself or doing research myself. So I have essentially been managing private sector education companies in India for the last 13 years or so. In a leadership position, and these are primarily in the high schooling space and the preschooling space, the pre-primary schooling space, and a little bit of daycare as well. And before that, I was a regular corporate kind of an executive. So I was in H5, 92 to 96, BTech in electrical, and post that I immediately joined IIM Calcutta. Did an MBA because I couldn't figure out electrical engineering starting third year. And post my MBA, I was in a variety of jobs. The most interesting one of them being part of a startup television channel in the fashion and lifestyle space in India by the Times of India group, hobnobbing with the models. So, but eventually found my calling in education, because that was something that I always wanted to do. Right, I mean, even out of IIT, I wanted to kind of be in the education sector in some form or fashion in India, because I felt that there was a lot to be done in education in India. And through a chance phone call, I got this opportunity about 13 years back to head a startup company in preschool education. So there was a startup company in India which was doing a joint venture with a preschool group from Singapore called Eaton House, and the idea was to bring international kind of preschooling to India and to set up high quality preschools which India has not seen before. So I got a chance to build that company up from scratch, and out of the last 13 years, I've spent about 10 years in that company. Currently, I do something different, but again in the preschooling and high schooling space. In between, I headed the Aga Khan Schools for India. The Aga Khan Group is a Paris headquartered school group which runs schools in 10 developing countries in Asia and Africa. So I was the head for India. So yeah, so that's been my journey, Anurag.
So where are most of your schools? Are they in big cities or also in smaller towns?
So the company in which I spent most of my time and I helped build, that had preschools in the, so these were upmarket premium international kind of preschools. So they were in the big cities. However, in the high schools that I used to operate, these were more in the rural parts of Gujarat and Telangana.
Okay, that's nice. And so your schools still span the whole K-12 spectrum, or is it more pre-primary and primary right now?
So right now I'm in I had an organization in which I manage both preschools and K-12 schools. And,
So what's
and in the current organization, it's very, very Bombay Pune focused.
okay? What contrast do you see in the education style of these schools compared to when we went to school? I mean, I don't know whether you remember your primary, but in general, what was the schooling pattern like then and now?
Yeah, so I think it's changed significantly, but at the same time, there are still many commonalities in terms of parent thinking. So what's been happening is that in our time, the share of government schools was very high. So my sense is that even in our batch of 96, more than half of us would have ended up going to a government school as opposed to a private school. Whereas these days it's exactly the opposite. So I mean, the share of private schooling in India has gone up big time, and parents and students have realized that there's a benefit of going to private sector schools, and government sector shares have gone down basically. So that's what's happened in schooling. And in preschooling, what has happened is that in our time, preschooling was non-existent almost. But this became a whole new industry before entering formal primary school in India. And for the most part, it was unorganized players, which is the auntie down the road who was setting up something in her home. But in the last 15, 20 years or so, uh, preschooling has kind of shifted to the branded players. So there's a whole host of branded players in India now which provide reasonable quality preschooling, some better than others. But fundamentally, what has happened is that parents have, while there's that 0.1% of the parents who are more evolved in their thinking, who are willing to take a chance with alternate styles of education for their children. But the remaining, and which is why brands like ours kind of did well, basis those 1.1% population. But the vast majority of the population of the parent community, even in the big cities today, even in 2021, still believes that they need to make engineers and doctors out of their children. Uh, and just a small anecdote. So in 2008, we had set up this preschool in a in an area called Kalyani Nagar in Pune, which is an affluent part of Pune, and it was a big fancy school, and we didn't have too many resources, and I was sitting and trying to convert a few customers myself. So a parent walks in, and he was an engineer and IT, I mean in the IT sector in Pune, and he says, and he came with his wife and child, and he says, बाकी सब ठीक है, but आपके प्री स्कूल में जाके मेरा बच्चा IIT में जा सकता है क्या? So I kind of felt like laughing, and I of course told him my background subsequently, and the only way to convert him was to basically say to him that, look, आपका बच्चा हार्वर्ड जाएगा, IIT नहीं जाएगा. And that actually worked, and he paid up. So the unfortunate part, I think, is that parent mentality in large parts is still the same as in our generation, which is the unfortunate part.
So this companies which you work with now, have they been able to bring in some aspects of education research into early education?
So what some of the better companies are trying to do uh, at both the primary education level and the pre-primary education level is that they've now got large teams for curriculum creation. And earlier, everything was just NCERT or state board or ICSE or what have you. And I'm not even talking about the IB schools in India here, right? The International Baccalaureate. I'm not even talking about those schools, but even some of the better preschools and high schools are trying to actually bring in some cutting edge research into their style of teaching, both from a pedagogical standpoint and from a content standpoint. So there's definitely some original research happening in India in this field, but it's still very scattered and very scanty compared to most other fields.
So whatever new things you've tried to do, has it been easy to disseminate that thinking into your teachers? I mean, you have to convert teachers first before you can convert students. How difficult has that been?
So that's a great question, Anurag. So while many of us, and there are others like me who've kind of had access to good quality education in India and then chosen to be in the education sector in India. Um, so while we may from a top down perspective try to improve the education system in our own small way in India, but the as you rightly said, at the end of the day, what really matters is the quality of the teacher and how excited she is being a teacher and how competent she is at her job. And that's something that's, even though it's much better than our time, but it's by and large lacking even today in India, at least in the school education space that I am familiar with. And it still ends up being a profession not of choice, and people
Yeah.
tend to kind of join this sector. Salaries are of course much better than earlier. The government is trying to play its part in terms of increasing salaries, and seventh pay commission salaries have come in now, etc. Even in private sector schools, in CBSE, for example. But despite that, people hesitate to become teachers, and they become teachers because they feel that they can balance family and work fairly fairly well if they become teachers. And that kind of continues to haunt our sector, and it's not easy to change teachers' mindsets, but everyone is trying.
And do you have a benchmark for how you select teachers? Is there a standardized test that the government offers, or do you have to create your own evaluation patterns? How do you do that?
So typically, each of the government just has a standard B.Ed, which is like a bachelor's in education, which is a qualification criterion for you to become a teacher in India in high schools. So each private sector organization has its own criteria of recruitment and selection, but there is no standardized test for teachers. However, what has happened in the last few years is that there's someone from IIT Delhi who's a batch junior to us, who actually has created a startup which is for teacher accreditation, and she is actually doing some pioneering work for accrediting teachers in India and setting benchmarks for teacher quality in India, but nothing from the government side.
But
Does she
what is
also
this?
train teachers? Sorry for interrupting. Ranjan, does she also train teachers? Is she into teacher
No,
training?
no, she doesn't train teachers. She only kind of evaluates them.
What is
Achha.
this company called, just to spread awareness? What is this company called?
This is called CENTA, CENTA. It was founded a few years back by Ramya. Ramya was IIT Delhi one batch our junior, and also happened to be one batch my junior at IIM Calcutta.
Okay.
And she was heading the education practice for McKinsey in India.
Okay. And how do you evaluate? I mean, how do you keep a tab on which teachers are teaching well, which teachers not? Because, you can't really get a feedback from kids that young. How do you do that?
So this is done through a mechanism that we call in our industry class observation. So a bunch of people actually attend classes regularly with these teachers, And these are not like the inspections in our times. These are much more evolved with standardized rubrics and metrics that we've created for quality assessment. And essentially what happens is there would be academic colleagues who would actually attend classes, and there would be people like me who are non-academic who would also attend classes and rate teachers. And that's how we would appraise them.
Does this system work well enough?
Well, not as well as some of the other systems, but that's the best. That's kind of doable is the sense that we have right now.
And how has the right to education bill affected primary and pre-primary education?
So pre-primary is still largely kind of out of the ambit, and the government doesn't get into it too much. But and I know we have people from the government like Ambrish sitting here as well, who actually influence government policies, at least at the state government level in Rajasthan, etc. But in the primary and secondary schooling education space, what happens is that uh, schools, private sector schools who are trying to do good quality work get hit very badly because of certain government policies. Because what happens is while the government wants to do good for the public of India, and the government therefore has reservations for 25% of the school to be from the underprivileged sections, which are practically free, etc. The other thing, and that kind of hits the bottom lines of private sector preschools and makes them struggle to kind of pay teacher salaries. And the second thing that happens is that the government also controls fees in India, right? So you can't actually charge what you deserve to charge or what the market can pay. And therefore, you have to have price ceilings on your schools and ceilings on how much you can increase fees by year on year. And that kind of makes meritocracy a bit of a challenge in our sector for teachers as well as for non-teaching staff.
And how much have you seen a shift in how hands-on parents are nowadays in that level of teaching, or is it still the same?
Oh, completely different. I mean, many of us would be parents, and our parenting style, I'm sure you know, is very different from our parents' parenting styles, and I get to kind of see this firsthand, right? Because people like you have been my parents and my customers for the longest time. So it's kind of very difficult because parents want to micromanage these days, and parents want their children to be superstars in every field that they can be in, right from music to sports to everything else under the sun, while still wanting to get them into IITs. And therefore, the expectations of the school are phenomenal, and they feel that school teachers should do this, that, and the other, which is hard for and they don't want to actually spend any time with children themselves because they're just too busy in their own lives and with whatever else, right? So that becomes a very big challenge for schools in our country relative to our times. But obviously, the good part is that there's no corporal punishment, there's no hitting, and there's no beating and all of that. So all of those things have improved.
Okay, great, Ranjan. Anybody else has a question?
I have one question, Ranjan. What is the state of vernacular education in India these days? Because I came from that side and I almost see nobody sending their kids to vernacular schools anymore, at least in the people I talk to. So what's going on? Do you know there?
Yeah. So vernacular schools are still pretty popular in rural India. I would say they're still pretty popular in Jalgaon, for example, where you came from. But what's happening is that even in Jalgaon today, the vast majority of the parent population may not be able to speak English themselves, but the aspirations are high enough for them to want to send their children to an English medium school. And I actually, as a part of my role, do parent interviews, etc., just to understand what customers are thinking about for their children. And I find that I have to try and converse with them in a Marathi or a Hindi, but they can't speak English themselves. They may be from a farming background or a small business background, but a majority of them are very aspirational. So whoever can afford it today sends their children to an English medium school in India across the country.
Anurag, I had one quick question. Ranjan, thanks again. So Vora did preempt my question about vernacular, so thanks for that. But the other question I had was the edtech sector. You know, the edtech sector is huge in India, or executive education is huge in India. And I know a couple of IIT Bombay alums are involved in, you know, fairly large edtech startups. So what's your view on that? What role they will play in K through 12?
Yeah, so I think in India, the delta that you see in terms of adoption of technology in every field, including education, that delta is very high in India, right? Compared to, let's say, the US or the developed parts of the world. Because in India, it kind of started small, right? The whole tech adoption bit. So therefore, in education, what has happened, for example, in the last 1 year, since everyone's been sitting at home thanks to COVID, is that the sheer adoption of the education of tech-enabled education has actually multiplied 10x. So what growth would have happened to tech-enabled education, online learning essentially, at various levels, over the next 5 years has pretty much happened in the last 1 year in India, and that kind of delta uh, is not likely to ever get seen in the US or the UK, for example. So that's a very, very interesting shift in India that's happening, and a lot of startups have kind of come into play in the last few years in this sector. So India's most valuable company today, for example, by market cap or by valuation rather, most valuable startup by valuation is actually an edtech company. It's an education company called Byju's, which is using technology to educate. But there are many small time startups as well. So I was hearing some number that some 500 odd companies have got funded in the last 1 year alone in the edtech sector in India, which is massive by any stretch of imagination. So edtech is the new flavor of the season in India, and I think it will continue to grow at least for the next 5 to 10 years. But the other part of India is also that it will never move completely to edtech. So there are still enough parents and students out there who are preferring the physical schools and preschools, and even for higher education colleges, and therefore there is likely to be a shift to the hybrid kind of a model, but it will never really become completely tech enabled.
So one question, Ranjan, this is Amit. So is EdTech in India meant to complement schools and colleges or supplement them? Because this is not clear, because I do know of people who pretty much skip the entire high school with equivalent EdTech, because they say eventually if I have to send my kids to the US or I have to send them to IIT, why would I bother sending them to, say, a junior college like Rupar, for example?
Yeah, so I think the way most parents are seeing it, or the way most students are seeing it, is to supplement the physical education in India. But the way the edtech companies are marketing themselves is to basically pretty much replace the physical schools, right? So most people are saying that you don't need to actually attend school and college anymore. You just take our courses online and you're set, and you have the flexibility and the cost advantage and all of that basically. So that's what, but that's kind of more marketing spiel on the part of the education companies or the edtech companies than reality itself, at least in the way Indian parents in India see it. I don't know about Indian parents in the US like most of you.
एंड देन आमिर खान आके बोलता है कि मार्क्स पढ़ेंगी, वेदांतों में पढ़ोगे तो अच्छी मार्क्स आएंगे आपकी। जिसने खुद थ्री इडियट्स में कंप्लीटली इसकी विपरीत बात की थी। मैं वेदांतों का एम्प्लॉय भी हूँ।
We have to move on to the next speaker, please. What we can do is we can all other questions. Yeah, Daddy, yeah, go ahead.
Like quickly share one last anecdote.
Yeah, please.
So a very heartwarming anecdote, which actually makes it worth staying in the education sector in India, which is that, at one of our preschools in Bombay, which is in Hirandani Gardens, Powai, I was attending an annual concert, the annual show of the students. And in India, there's this concept of actually, the management team becoming chief guests basically in schools. So I was the chief guest at this event many years back. And in the audience, there was a batchmate of mine actually sitting there as a parent, And in the break, he and I bumped into each other, and I realized that he's my customer, and he actually didn't know that I was associated with this group and with this preschool. So that was kind of heartwarming, because someone who I thought was a very high caliber person had actually chosen our preschool for his child. So yeah, so that was great. But thank you.
That's great, Daddy. May your schools
One
grow leaps and
question,
bounds. And
Anurag, sorry, I have a question, but can I just cut in for like 15 seconds?
no, Reddy, because we are only 50%
no.
done.
I don't have a question. I just want to say that Ashwin Seshia was apparently on the call. Another accomplished academician from our batch. Just wanted to recognize him. That's all.
Yeah. Sesha sent a message also. Yeah.
He dropped off actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Daddy, thanks a lot. Guys, whatever questions we have, let's for Daddy and for all the others so far, we can keep it at the end. Otherwise, we'll overshoot our time deadline. So let's move on to Dabir, Onkar Dabir. How are you, man?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
So quick introduction of your professional journey and your research area.
Definitely. We'll keep it short. So I was in H3 and got my BTech in E. I continued to do my MTech at IIT Bombay, then went to UC San Diego to get my PhD. Worked at Qualcomm for a year, then decided to move back to India. So I was also at the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. But unlike Mandar, who's in physics, I was in the School of Technology and Computer Science. I spent 9 years there from 2004 to 2013. During that period, I was also an adjunct at IIT Bombay. So I used to visit the department almost weekly during that time. Then 2013, decided to move back to the US, moved back to Qualcomm Research again. And I was there till 2018 when Amazon convinced me to move up to the Pacific Northwest. So I've been here for about 3.5 years. My research interests have evolved, but I've always been an inference detection estimation person. Just that I've applied it to different domains. And these days, I lead our applied science team in AWS and primarily focus on computer vision and machine learning services.
Fantastic. So what's your, we asked this question to Nandan and Mandar also, what's your contrasting point of view between, let's start with India versus US?
So let me, because my India career was primarily from an academic point of view, right? Let me, and some of these points are already covered. So I'll probably just try to add the deltas or the differences that I noticed, right? So one thing I felt when I joined and I was at TIFR, right? Like it was a bit sad to hear from Mandar that funding is becoming patchy now, but at least what I felt the first 2 years of the career, you had to establish yourself. So getting funding was a little difficult. But I felt that actually getting funding was never really the main bottleneck for me. For me, the main bottleneck was if you want to do a large, complex project, can you raise the right sort of resources, right? Can you have the right number of students with the right amount of background training so that you can actually scale your project, right? So to me, that was always a problem, right? Indeed, TIFR had a very high bar. But what happens with that high bar is you also end up with very few students, which kind of limits what kind of research projects you can tackle. Yes, you can lower the bar, and this is not to that I want to throw IIT Bombay or any of the IITs under the bus, but IITs tend to have slightly lower bar on their PhD programs, at least when I was at that point. And I did interact with those students as an adjunct as well, right? But the flip side there was that even though you got slightly larger volume, they needed a lot more mentorship, right? So for them to reach a level where they can start being very productive, so for me, right, that scaling was hard. On the US side, right, in general, I feel there is a critical mass even in subtopics, right? There's a very large number of universities. Even in industry, there are a large number of research positions. So what happens is that even if you pick a subtopic, right, there's usually a critical mass there. So there are a lot of ideas floating around. So if you can connect to that system, right, it's a much more vibrant system. And if you want to sort of raise a group, and particularly now that I'm in the industry, right, just because of the pay structure and things like that, the way it works is that it's actually very easy for you to raise large teams. It's also the kind of teams that you're building are also now have experienced researchers, right? These are not people that you're sort of training. So I feel that create, at least in my career, I've seen like a difference in momentum, right? In the industry part, I feel I can raise much stronger team. I can take a lot more ambitious projects. While I was at TIFR, it was an awesome place for doing theory, foundational work, and I wrote a lot of papers in those domains, right? But if you wanted to get out of that space and started to scale your projects, there was a lot of viscosity from a variety of angles.
Viscosity, huh? Okay.
Yeah, and there's actually an anecdote here, right? Like, and I should share because actually this viscosity word came from an IIT Bombay professor friend of mine. And in one of these conferences, right, we were chatting about all the difficulties that we face. And he said, it's not like there's this one or two specific problems, because if there are one or two specific problems, you can break your head and figure out how to solve that, right? But it's just like you're walking in this viscous fluid, right? And that really slows you down. In fact, he had a very interesting blog why in his lab it took him 6 months to get an AC repaired, right? And how it eventually led to a fire in his lab, right? So
okay, so one question I have specific to collaboration. I have heard from some other professor friends of mine that it's very difficult for them to collaborate in IITs. So first question, is that the same in TIFR? And secondly, how does it work in the US compared to here?
yeah, I actually, when I was at TIFR, and I definitely felt, right, like the critical mass point that I made, right? I definitely felt that even at that point, right? In fact, at that point, I was working quite a bit in wireless comm, right? And we were in one of the conferences, an internal Indian conference. A few of us got together and we were counting number of people who routinely publish from India in the top 2 or 3 journals, right? And it wasn't even 10, right? Uh, so that critical mass is always a problem, right? And so it's very easy for you to, get into your own corner and start getting isolated over time. And you have to be really proactive to build your connection. So while I was at TIFR, I definitely felt I had to be proactive to build my connections with professors in IIT, IISc. Actually, there were a bunch of young probabilists in the ISI network. And since my work also required a lot of that, I also kind of proactively built my connection there. For me, I always felt that the ecosystem was richer in US and there were always ideas floating around. So I also particularly kept that connection. I used to make sure that I come to at least 1 or 2 conferences a year over here and sort of stay plugged into that network, right? And it almost at that point felt essential to do that. Otherwise, it was very easy for you to get isolated.
And what is the contrast of the same thing in industry versus research? I mean, is it easier to execute projects in research or is it easier to do that in industry? Vis-a-vis funding, vis-a-vis project management, reviews, whatever comes to your mind, just tell us about that.
Yeah, I think there's some differences in both the incentives and the constraints that you have. For example, right, in the industry, I feel there is a lot more scrutiny. At least, there are certain industry research labs which almost operate like, the Bell Labs of the old time. So, leave those aside. I have not been in those industry labs, but at least the labs I have been, right, you need to show relevance at some time scale, right? Whether it's a 1 year or a 3 year time horizon, but you need to show relevance to the business, right? So there is a lot more scrutiny. Academics, right? And that's one of, at least at the start of my career, that for me, that was the attraction point, right? You have a lot more freedom to define your problem space, your research domain. And as such, the scrutiny is less, right? So it gives you a lot of freedom to explore a wider range of topics. Here, on the other hand, you're relatively constrained. But I think the positive side of that scrutiny is that once you actually clear that scrutiny, once you have convinced the stakeholders, now there is very broad buy-in. And people are really willing to back you with real money, real resources. And so yes, you have to go through that scrutiny, but if you are able to clear that hurdle, right, then you can really start taking up ambitious projects, right? So to me, at least that's the difference I've felt, right, that there is a lot more scrutiny at the start in the industry research projects that I take. But once you clear those, then there is a lot of backing, right? And you're not really constrained in terms of money at that point. Hey, you're on mute, Anurag.
Sorry. What about the type of research that industry does versus what, I mean, we all know what the education institutions do, but does industry also go down to the fundamentals sometimes?
Yeah, yes, I think sometimes is the keyword, right? Because at least the places I have been, right? Not all domains necessarily need researchers, right? There are certain domains which are, first of all, typically R&D groups will limit where you are trying to build some new products or something, but there's still a lot of ambiguity in terms of research and science. But there is enough justification for the company to move fast in that area, so they're willing to fund that, right? So there are those pockets, right? So first of all, that's one difference that I feel in industry. But once you're in that domain, right, you want to deliver what the customer needs, right? And in research, for example, what happens is, right, you might have a very popular benchmark, and if you improve 1 or 2% over that benchmark, it's awesome, right? You have a publication, and your publication story can be driven by that, and your career can be built incrementally that way, right? On the industry side, on the other end, what happens is that if that 1% improvement is not good enough for your customer, right, it doesn't matter, right? And yes, so there are these pockets where that happens, and in those cases, you're really forced to innovate and often go beyond what's commonly available. And yes, in those cases, you need to go down to all kinds of details. The only difference I would say is because there is pressure to prove relevance, you kind of need to build a dial, right? I mean, it is true that you may have a research program which after 3 years is going to substantially change the state of the art, right? But you do want to show that even in the first year, there is going to be some incremental gain in the second year and third year, right? So there is that pressure. But if you can, definitely there are, these pockets where this happens. Of course, you need to plan it accordingly.
And industry, traditionally, in the old times at least, the industry used to lean heavily upon research institutions for their technology. Is that still the case, or is that reducing with more captive teams in big companies?
That's actually a good question. I still feel there is a lot of sharing that happens across academia and industry, right? Because at the end of the day, the conferences, all these people, and when you meet at conferences, there's a free exchange of ideas. So I think that still continues. I also feel that this a lot of academics themselves are proactively looking for funding from the industry. So that actually becomes another source of connection. In particular, when I was at TIFR, right? I mean, I of course had grants from DST and the Ministry of Information Technology, but I also used to get grants from General Motors, GE, and at a later point from Microsoft Research, right? So I feel that's another point where interaction happens. So I would say, yes, there is some crossover, but it is also true that there are certain kinds of things where academia has an advantage just because of the setup, and some certain kinds of cases where industry has an advantage. So if you're a field which is very driven by data, like computer vision, machine learning, the kind of things I do, industry definitely has the advantage of it because we are not working on some generic public data sets, right? We are working on data sets which are really specific to our customers, and we get to see the whole journey of the customer, right? So some of the solutions that we can create or the research that we can do is definitely enabled by just having access to that kind of unique data. On the other hand, academia usually does not readily have access. So some of the research gets hampered by that. But then the positive side on academia is that, like I said, right, there's a lot more freedom, right? So if you want to tackle some sort of foundational problems, and if that program is going to take 5 years, right, you definitely can still build that story, right? Because there is less pressure. And I would say for that kind of foundational work, academia is still the better place. There are some exceptions. There are some industry research labs which allow their researchers to do that. So it's not like black and white. There are some cases in between, but broadly, I think that's the difference I see.
And in industry, how difficult it is, how much friction is there between different technology teams? So for example, if I want to build a product which requires chemical engineering and mechanical engineering and electronics to work together, how difficult is it in industry?
Yeah, no, I think definitely, right? I feel that when I was a faculty, right, relatively the people that I used to interact with, talk to, had a background very similar to me, right? there were some variations, but communicating with them was always very easy, right? Now what happens is, at least what I find is that since you want to solve a customer problem, right? Whether, on a 1 year or a 3 year time horizon, all parts of the system play into it, right? And since I'm strong at algorithms, of course, my first instinct is to focus on algorithmic improvements, right? But there are other parts to the system, right? And there are innovative people in all teams, right? There are talented people in all teams, right? And somebody has some brilliant ideas on the UX side, somebody has some brilliant idea on the telemetry or sensing side, right? And from the final product or project point of view, right? Even those ideas can have a significant impact. And being able to talk to those people, do the balancing and the trade-offs, right, is definitely a challenge. I personally, I find that it actually enriches my scientific life. So I actually find it interesting as well. But yes, sometimes it can be a source of friction. And different companies have different ways of dealing with it. Uh, at least I would say I've been lucky. The teams that I have been part of, at no point has this become more like territorial battles. Usually the people have been more collaborative. So I don't know whether that's the norm or I've just been lucky at that.
Okay, that's good. So I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions if we want to ask Utkar something. If not, then I have one more question. Onkar, do you see a... Sorry, go ahead. Who was that?
Yeah, this is my Harish. I had a question for, a question for Onkar. So I have noticed over the past, I would say 5 to 10 years, that the number of people who are, kind of working in quantitative fields tend to be predominantly Chinese. And, there are very few Indians I see at the workplace, who are tackling some of these problems. And I wanted to get your thoughts on, is it really the case that they just have more students in their universities who are pursuing these fields and hence there is a significantly more output, or do you see other explanations for these?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. See, actually, in US, if I look at the composition, for example, my team or the teams around me, right, I definitely see representation from all around the world. But if I just look at participation in conferences, right, and try to see global participation there, I definitely agree with you, right? Like in the quantitative areas that I'm familiar with, and computer vision, machine learning is mostly quantitative these days. There's a lot of experimentation, right? Definitely, China, I don't know what exactly they have done, but I definitely see a lot more participation, both in terms of, papers as well as, industry demos. Relatively, I would say if I compare with India, right, I see less of that. We can debate as to why the reasons are there, but I share the observation that you're making. I think in the top research groups in the US, because we sort of the US ecosystem collects people from all around the world, right? So you see a good representation from China, India, for that matter, even Turkey and Europe, right? So there I don't see that sort of, I do see a healthy diversity there globally. But in conferences, yes, I definitely see what you're saying, that in addition to the US, there's a lot more contribution coming from China and relatively little from India.
Yeah, because the reason I was also mentioning is because I work at Google, and I have observed that pretty much all the statisticians which Google has, they're all from China. They're all from China. I've probably seen like 1 or 2 Indians maybe here and there, but like every group that I interact with, it's predominantly like, people from the mainland. And I think
I see
it does impact work in the sense that, you don't see enough Indians who you can work with and so on. And then, obviously these are really good people, but I was just wondering, because India has one ISI, but I'm not sure if we don't have more institutions of scale who are able to graduate some of these students.
Yes, no, actually that's a good point. In general, right, what I have felt, and this probably goes back to my experience as an academician in India, right? what I felt was that the way Indian academics was set up, right, in general, it didn't encourage diversity of research areas as much. I mean, I can give you some anecdotes, right? The academic circles that I used to be, right, there would be constant debates about theory versus experimental, constant debate about pure science versus engineering. And I personally felt, right, to me, my viewpoint was that beyond a point, all of these are tools, right? And you're trying to solve some problems, and each tool has its pros and cons, and you really need to pick the one that suits best, right? But sometimes I felt these sort of discussions almost border on, to use a strong word, intellectual casteism. And I don't know whether, it's something cultural and maybe that's what inhibits, but I've always felt that the US culture has been relatively more open, right? So to me, honestly, it's a bit surprising to hear that you're seeing that the representation, global representation in the teams that you're seeing is not as diverse as you would like. That's a bit of surprise because at least from what I've seen that diversity within the research teams I'm familiar with. But in the conferences, yes, right. I don't see that global diversity is still dominated by US. China is definitely coming up strong, and to some extent, Europe and India are lagging behind.
One possible explanation is that Kotpagi, accidentally is still working in a conference. Maybe he's not gone back to the office, right? So anyway, guys, so thanks a lot, Onkar. If you're around at the end, if somebody else has more questions, we'll take those up. Okay, we are through 4 people now. We have 2 remaining. Shatlad, who will go next. And guys, stay around because Sanjeet Adarsh, who's going to go at the end, is probably one common thread to all of us. The only common thing we all have is JE, and he's going to talk at length about that. So stay with us. It'll be worth the while. And let's go to Akshat.
Yep.
Akshat, thanks for staying around for 1 hour listening to old fogies. Give us a quick introduction about yourself, and what you're going to do now.
Right. So hi everyone, I'm Akshat Rajlad. I'll be graduating this year with a BTech in Mechanical Engineering and a minor degree in Management from School of Management, IIT Bombay itself. During my 4 years in industry, I've kind of explored a lot of activities. So I was a part of a team which builds autonomous underwater vehicles. So that's one thing. Then there's this Insight, I guess that was there earlier also. The media body. So I was part with the data analytics team of that team. And I have been with the mentorship programs, so institute mentorship program, department mentorship program, and teaching English. And then I have been a TA with the physics department for 6 terms. So yeah, that has been pretty good. In general, I've enjoyed a lot. Actually, the online thing is pretty sad, but otherwise it has been fun. Yeah.
So let's start with that. How has life changed because of COVID? You did 2 years in or 5 semesters on campus and 3 semesters at home, right?
Right. So 2.75 years, almost like the COVID thing started in March 2020. So even the 6th semester we were half through before COVID hit us. But yeah, I mean, so it's very different in the sense that, so I believe that this would have been same earlier also, but at least, I mean, a lot of you here are professors in IIT Bombay. So I'm kind of intimidated to say this, but our learning is a lot. I mean, it's based on the interactions we have with the students or the peer-to-peer learning. I think that kind of contributes maybe 80%. At least that's what I feel, and a lot of us feel. And that thing has been hampered because in online situation, even if we want to interact with our friends, it will be very limited. Or even if we have some con calls, I mean, that kind of energy can never really come in any online situation. So that's not the best thing to happen as far as I think undergraduate education is concerned. In terms of just getting the course done or in terms of getting the knowledge, there hasn't been much compromise because IIT Bombay did manage it pretty well. I feel not a lot of people feel so, but I think given the conditions, given the uncertainty which was there, IIT Bombay did a very good job. I mean, they scheduled everything nicely. There were fair relaxations also, and even the course curriculum was tried to maintain in such a way that no one loses anything. So yeah, I mean, given these things from institute side, I don't think that there's much they could have done. But in general, online education kind of inhibits, I mean, the development which we would have had, not just the academic part, but the other things which we would have learned, they probably got a bit less, I'd say.
Has it had an impact on the morale of people by and large?
I mean, initially it did. I mean, initially it definitely was pretty sad, but then eventually everyone realizes that us not getting called back in institute is for the greater good. So you cannot really pressurize institute to call everyone back.
Yeah.
And I mean, so the thing is that this is one-off situation, right? I don't think anyone would have experienced it earlier. A lot of people are understanding what's happening, but there have been more. So when you're at home, there are certain things that you have to take care of, right? So I mean, all of us know what life in institute is, late nights, and a lot of other things. And when you are
So
at
that's what
home,
I was going to ask you about. Let's go through
yeah,
that. So how's life in IIT when you were in hostels? How
yeah.
was life like? Did you guys, I mean, LAN parties or personal chat sessions? We used to call them CAT sessions. What's predominant?
So we do. I mean, institute. There are a lot of parties, and it's mostly outside the institute. So because in institute you can. So what we have is that a lot of people gather in someone's room, and everyone here knows, right? So the hostel rooms are not that big, and still like 10 to 15 people would be there in the room, and the energy would be very high. And then there might be like card games. People play card games, poker, things like that. And there are a lot of other fun events also. And yeah, I mean, things are pretty good. We do enjoy a lot. So, and there are a lot of groups. So basically, there are a lot of tech teams. There are a lot of other groups. Institute has developed a lot in terms of the size of the number of students. There are like I think your batch would have had what 300, 400 UG students. My batch
Yeah.
had 1,000 UG students, and the batch which just came in has 1,400 UG students in IIT Bombay, just IIT Bombay. So the size has increased, and correspondingly the activities and both in terms of depth and breadth has increased a lot. So there are these groups, and all of these groups celebrate the way they want. So I was part of this team where we celebrated birthdays or whenever there was an award ceremony. So we used to go for treats. We went for a lot of treats, movie treats, things like that. And within institute, birthdays, GPL. I mean, I hope all of these things would have been there back
And
then also.
what about things like sports and all? Do people still engage in sports as much as we
Yep.
used to? Yeah.
So I think I discussed this with Sridhar also back then that sports do exist still and a lot of people play and I mean there are a lot more I don't know how many opportunities existed back then, but right now in IIT Bombay there's almost everything. I mean I cannot think of a sport which does not exist. I mean the horse riding and things like that, but otherwise there are very few sports which won't be there in IIT Bombay. But if you talk about the passion with which people would go, probably the fraction would be slightly less, and that's partly due to technology and things which have come up. Like sports GC would have held a very big position in your times, I guess. That's what at least Chichore portrayed. But if you think about our times, GCs and all are still something which people look forward to. Inter-IITs are still something people look forward to. But they're not like the ultimate things. Like that's something which we have to win. Like H4 is still better than H3, but then we don't really have that kind of rivalry anymore, I'd say. I mean, we have done the dropping the eggs thing once, but it's just for fun and not really for like the proper rivalry and things like
I think GC was a big deal only for H3 and H4. The rest of us were really
Yeah.
poor at sports. So
that.
anyway, so how's what's the impact of this increased batch size on academics? I believe that there are multiple batches for every course and different instructors, different schedules also. So how does that,
Right.
do you feel
So
that it hampers you in some way or not?
Hamper wouldn't be the right word. I guess the only thing is that I mean you might get lucky and get a good professor for a particular course, but at the same time you might be unlucky and get a not so good professor in another course. Not so good, I think, in terms of the teaching style or maybe strictness and things like that. Broadly speaking, I think it's not the academics part which probably is a big concern. The only thing is that it's not exactly dilution of quality as such, but I think 1,400 is a big number. Like it's a very big number. Probably 1,400 IITians graduated back then, and now 1,400 IIT Bombay graduates will be there. So in some sense, that is good also. Like a lot of people are getting this exposure. The kind of I have friends who are not in IITs also, right? So the kind of technology they get to experience versus what we get, it's very different. And maybe someone of these 1,400 might do very good, who otherwise might not have got the cut.
Do you
So
guys
this way,
still know, do you guys still use the word Arjigiri?
definitely, for sure. I mean, at
Yeah.
these things, I don't think we'll ever leave IIT Bombay, irrespective of number of students, years, branches. They're gonna stay.
Do
But
you use
yeah,
nabad as a word? Nabad?
I think this thing has lost touch. Maybe.
Yeah.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
Nervous breakdown.
Oh, okay. I think we've stopped using it for politically correct reasons because.
How
But
does
yeah,
that, what, so that's a very interesting point, the political awareness or political, this awareness of what people perceive, right? Who drives that? I mean, it's a collective decision. Is it percolates from one group to the wider group? How does it work?
Basically, your wokeness.
Yep. Sorry,
Wokeness.
Sridhar.
Wokeness.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, I don't think that word actually got out of touch because of this reason. But in general, I think I mean, if you're asking about who decides what is right and what is wrong to say or things like that, like policing or something like that, I guess it kind of evolves through. Like there are a lot of things even I have seen during our times itself, like some things which you should not say or some activities which you should not do. Like people when come in early, there's not so much awareness about the, let's say, LGBTQ community and things like that. But over the time, thanks to the kind of community we live in, people do start appreciating what is right and what is wrong. It's not like everyone appreciates it. You'll still find people who'll kind of create nuisance. But in general, yeah, I mean, people try to be as fair with everyone as possible and not to really do or say something which kind of ends up being putting the other person in a bad place. I think a lot of people do try it. But yeah, I mean, there's no policing as such or no one who decides that this is right or this is wrong. It just kind of happens over time.
That's good. That's the way it should be.
Yeah.
So now, since this whole session is about education academics, let's come to that. What percentage of people would you say want to go for further studies in an undergraduate
Want
batch?
to go would be, I mean, just want to go would be a pretty high fraction, like I'd say 30-40% maybe, or maybe even more if it's just about want to go. But how many would really go and not do something? Like I would want to go for further education, but I really want to do this thing which I'm doing right now a bit more. If you include those people also, so people who will convert for further education, they'll be a little less. As someone here also mentioned, right, that the fraction has gone down, but I think Professor Nandan mentioned. But yeah, I mean, the fraction is actually pretty down.
And do people, I mean, in our times, almost everybody who applied got a scholarship to study abroad. Is that still the case, or do people
No,
have to pay their way
that's
through?
not the case, probably because of 1400 IIT Bombay graduates, 1400 IIT Madras graduates. So it's like a lot of competition, even amongst the Indian pool. Like I know a friend of mine who got accepted in Stanford, but he could not get scholarship, and then he also got accepted in University of Michigan, and there he's getting scholarship. So he's leaving Stanford and going for Michigan. I mean, these are two almost equally good schools, but I don't think there'd be anyone, if you keep the money part aside, there won't be anyone who choose University of Michigan above Stanford.
Yeah.
So this kind of thing has started happening. A lot of people do get funding. It's not like scholarships are completely gone. But probably like even my uncles and aunts, what I've heard is that even if you're going to US and you're Indian, you'll probably get a scholarship for masters. I don't think it's the case anymore. I mean, not this much. Yep.
And I mean, you said you were from mechanical, but you did a minor in management, right?
Yep.
So that definitely was not possible in our time. So how flexible is the second half of your curriculum in terms of electives, etc.?
So, I mean, in general, IIT Bombay has become very flexible now. I don't know if you read the news recently. So IIT Bombay is now venturing into liberal arts as well. So people can get a bachelor's of science and do courses in economics, history, and things like that, and get a liberal arts degree. In general, so that was not there in my time. Like it feels very wrong to say my time because I'm just graduating. But so 4 years, even in these 4 years, a lot of things have changed, right? So earlier, recently, there's this thing called interdisciplinary dual degree program. So basically, irrespective of which bachelor's program you are in, you can do some courses of the other department, and then in your third year, go for this IIIDP, and then do extra courses and the thesis of that department, and you'll get a bachelor's in your department and a master's in the other department. There's this minor program where you can do 5 courses in any of the fields and get a minor certificate for that particular field. liberal arts has come up. There are so many branches now. I mean, I don't know. I don't think this would have been there. So there's BS economics, there's environmental science, energy science. A lot of these things have also started coming up.
Some of them
And
were there at our times, but not so much flexibility. So how do people, what drives what people, how they dissect their degree, what courses, electives they take? Is it driven by the market value or is it driven by the interest predominantly?
It's like, I mean, it's a function of at least three factors, which includes market value and the interest, and the third is grade and professor. But yeah, I'd say that, I mean, yeah, it's definitely true. So there was this course this year in online semester. It's BB something, BB61 or something like that. It's a bio course, deals with I don't know what, but the grading starts as like almost everyone gets an A, like a 10. It got 600 registrations. The course is for 50, 60 students. It got 600. So the classes were held in convocation hall. You'd be surprised to know this. The classes were held in convocation hall. So things like that also play a role, but predominantly it's interest and the faculty. I think definitely for me, this was the biggest factor. Who is the teacher? What's the kind of load? And I think a lot of people still do this. Timetable is obviously there. Like people would prefer evening or afternoon classes over 8:30 classes. People would prefer professors who are more non-taking of surprise quizzes, because professors sometimes take surprise quizzes, and that's one thing we can talk about later. And yeah, I mean, in general, strictness also. Like some professors, even I have had some professors who are like in a batch of 150, they'd be like 10 A's, 10 ABs. I mean, that kind of pulls your grade pretty down. And there are some professors who are comparatively chill in grading. And
why do grades matter now?
Yeah, exactly. Grades matter now for various reasons, right? Because eventually this grade will be counted to the CPI, and that will help you in application processes, even in jobs. I think whatever the scrutiny is done, at least a base CPI is required, and if two profiles are equally same, then probably you'd prefer someone who has a better CPI. But in some sense, it reflects more hardworking nature, or whatever you want to call it, more dedicated. So
do you guys still have masters and the BTech projects and dual degree projects?
Dual degree projects are compulsory. BTPs are not compulsory now. If someone is interested in doing, they can do it, and they can either tag it as an elective, or they can do a BTP with a course and then call that set as an honors part. So basically, then they'll be graduating with a BTech in mechanical engineering with honors. So this honors is if you do a project or you do extra 24 credits.
Okay, so 30, the BTPs are still worth 30 credits, is it?
I think it's 24 now. It's 6 plus 18. BTP1 is 6 and BTP2 is 18. Yeah, it's 24.
And how many people tend to do that?
Everyone who is willing to go for a master's kind of definitely does it in core masters. And the fraction won't be very high, to be honest. Like maybe hardly a 10th or a 5th or a 7th of a batch. Like our batch of 150 people, I think 20-25 max.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I also believe that what is no longer compulsory is NCC or NSS or NSO.
No, it's compulsory. It's completely compulsory.
It is compulsory.
Yep.
I thought it was made voluntary in between, but maybe it's come back.
Yep, it's compulsory 1 year in either NCC, NSO, or NSS. And
so BTP is not compulsory, but NCC is compulsory. Right.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
And do you guys still have engineering drawing, or is it only CAD now?
I mean, we don't have drafters now, so you can call us fake engineers, but we do have the AutoCAD and all the thinking part, SolidWorks. So when I was a freshie, we used to have everything on AutoCAD and just one session on SolidWorks, which is basically the modeling tool used a lot in industry also, I guess. And this year's freshie batch, they've used AutoCAD for 1 or 2 sessions and SolidWorks for all the other sessions. So even in these 4 years, that's what I'm saying, right? A lot of development.
What about workshops?
Yeah, that happens. And so I'm from mechanical. I've done it twice. Trained labor now, and we've done it a lot. Like all that welding, whatever that thing, everything is done.
Is part of workshop also additive manufacturing part of workshop, 3D printing, etc.?
I mean, you can do theoretical courses for that in mechanical department. It's not compulsory right now, 3D printing. So if you're part of any tech team or something like that, then you'll probably get exposure to these and a lot of other technologies as well. But as part of compulsory course, there's just like 5-6 basic things which you have to do. Additive manufacturing is not a part of it.
So it looks like IIT has quite upgraded the curriculum. How do students feel about the curriculum? Are they happy, or do they still want some changes?
Um, I'd say that I can speak for mechanical department over here. In general, people are not really, I mean, they're okay with what's happening, but probably they'd appreciate more freedom. There's still sufficient. I mean, I find it right that you have first year where you do the basic engineering or basic sciences, second year where you learn the basics of your engineering, and then third year, half is some advanced parts of your engineering which are compulsory, and then the remaining half and the last year is whatever you want to do. So I find this pretty good. Some people probably would want more freedom, and even the third year they'd want to be completely free. So that's one thing. But in general, I'd say that especially IIT Bombay has been very flexible, and it's a good system. Some
And in
courses
terms of
we,
your, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, some courses are there which probably are not really, I mean, not exactly irrelevant right now, but someone might not prefer doing that and might want to do something else. Like there are manufacturing processes when we are doing. There, I mean, I'd say that at an undergraduate level, you might want to know the basic things also, but maybe a lot of them are not really useful now, not really in application right now. So how much focus does one want to put over there? These things are there, but yeah, I mean, there's sufficient flexibility for sure.
And do people, is working in startups the new craze, or do people still prefer stable jobs?
I mean, working in startups is definitely not, it's definitely increased, but not the first choice for anyone. Yeah, that would be probably the right answer. It's increased a lot because the startups there are a lot more startups, right? Even I have like 3-4 people I know very well, and they are in startups, and they obviously want people from IIT Bombay. So it's very, the startup culture is like on a boom right now in India in general. In terms of job preferences, I'd still say that established companies still hold a better position. Like if you go about like day one or whatever you want to call it, or first preferences and things like that. Startups have started coming pretty close. Like there are good startups also like Zomato and things like that who have started picking up good talent also, but not the first preference for sure.
And does almost everybody do a minor in comp science now? I mean,
Yep,
or is it part?
Yep, you're very right. And someone here mentioned, right, that a lot of the branches part is decided by pay or something was mentioned in between. And that was, I mean, I don't want to say that it's 100% true, but if you look at, I mean, how is it possible that every year the same set of people in terms of the ranks want to prefer the same branch? I mean, it's almost impossible, right? How is it possible that a particular batch, and in each batch, the best, so to get the most intelligent brains always want to go for computer science? How is it possible? It's like, I don't think it's possible. So there is definitely some kind of influence of that thing also, and that's why minors in computer science, and so to say even minors in management, these things sell better in some sense.
So with a minor in management, do people still want to do MBAs afterward?
Yeah, minor in management doesn't really replace or substitute the MBA in any sense. Like you'll have to go for an MBA if you want to go for such roles. Minor definitely helps you know whether you want to do it or not, whether you enjoy that part or not.
So is there still a significant number of people wanting to do an MBA right after IIT, or is that not very high?
That number is probably the only thing apart from the total strength which has increased, or that fraction has increased a lot. You might say that I have a particular friend circle which is more towards that, but in general also the fraction of people, it's either you go for data science or computer science side, or you're going for MBA. If you take these two away, you're probably taking maybe 60, 70 or 80% of the class away. Yeah.
How do you guys, by and large, what does your batch feel? Are you guys, two things, hopeful about the future and hopeful about India? What do you guys think?
Hopeful about the future for sure. I mean, we have already hit an all-time low, I'd say, in terms of mental status also, and physically also, like exhaustion and everything. So I'm pretty sure that things are going to be very nice, and there are a lot of technologies developing, a lot of people doing a lot of good things, and I'd say that our batch, or at least our generation, is very motivated as well. Not that you guys are not, but even our batches. So that's there. So yeah, expecting a bright future, and probably 10 years, 20 years down the line, IIT Mars, IIT Moon, and whatnot. And in terms of development in India, yep, everyone is very hopeful now. I mean, people are, at least I think that this is kind of the fruit which was in the growing stage till now and is almost about to be of the size when it's very tasty. So hopefully next 10 years, 15 years will be very good for India. Now, don't call me a hypocrite if I come to America and join a firm there. But I'd say that India is kind of in a very good state right now. That's what I feel in the recent years.
I'm very glad to hear this, to be honest. Guys, any questions? Let's say
the problems
two
which were there,
questions.
I think the problems which were there during your times, probably a lot of those still, I guess, still exist in India. Like, I mean, the session is on record, but I mean, some problems related to politics, bureaucracy, things like that probably still exist. In terms of scientific development and all, probably things are getting better, thanks to a lot of people present here who have been researching in Indian institutes.
Well, when we joined, just last 2 minutes when I speak, when we joined, we were not very hopeful of the future because India was still quite a closed economy at that time. But while we were there, things opened up, so, and the effects of 92 liberalization started creeping down into the economy by 94, 95, I think. So by the time we graduated, things were much better. But when we joined, I remember people telling me to switch from aerospace just for the sake of my career all the time. Everybody, seniors, batchmates. So I'm glad to hear that people are more hopeful about the country and the future. Last question, if somebody has, otherwise we go to Sanjeet.
Yeah, I had one quick question. I just want to ask Akshat, how many people in his batch end up doing a PhD or in his senior batches? And how many people actually end up working in mechanical engineering related jobs?
Yeah, I mean, that's very nice question. And in terms of, like, if you say we have 150 students, probably from my batch, I think there'd be like 15 or 20 who will go for PhD. And people who'd be working with core mechanical engineering jobs, that fraction will be a disappointing number as such. Like, if 150 is the strength, then maybe 30, 40, definitely less than 50. Because there's a lot of things, like if you might be working in a mechanical engineering firm, like I had a senior who is in Jaguar Land Rover and he's a mechanical graduate. You'd expect him to be on the mechanical side, but even then he's on the software side of that firm. So a lot of these things are there, for I don't know what reasons, but yeah, if you're talking about core mechanical jobs, then they're still pretty less. What Anurag mentioned is not completely gone. There's still a lack of core engineering jobs, in some sense, in lack of preference, lack of probably money, lack of opportunities. That thing is still there. It's decreasing, but it's still there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot, Akshat.
No one really asked here about the fraction of girls in IIT Bombay anymore. But yeah, I mean, that fraction is
we're past that age.
Yeah. That fraction is better than this call for sure. So that's
We are all scared to ask that question.
No, so actually the increase in number is partly due to that, because government has brought a lot of policies. So there's a female reservation now, 7% increase every year, and that is, I think the target is 21 or 28%. So in my batch we have 150 mech, almost 150, 170 mech people, and they're like 5 to 7 girls. The batch which is Preshi or Sophie right now, they are like again 150, 160 people, or they're little more, 180, 190 people, and there are 40, 50, 40 girls, something like that. So that number as diversity is increasing.
Definitely has increased.
Yeah.
All right, Akshat, thanks a lot for your for hanging around. Thanks for answering our questions. Let's go to Sanjeet. I see two of Sanjeets now. Let's see what we get out of him. Sanjeet.
Hi Anurag. Actually, there's a reason I logged in from two devices. मैं इसमें से अभी लॉग आउट करता हूँ और दूसरे से ही करता हूँ मैं.
हाँ जाओ.
Actually ना मैं कुछ दिखाना चाह रहा था actually ऐसा एक छोटी सी चीज. When you told कि it's like a common thing for all of us and it really is related to our old memories, तो उसी को थोड़ा ट्रिगर करने के लिए एक चीज दिखाता हूँ.
Go ahead.
Hey, Anurag, while he's setting up, can I ask Akshat a question?
Go ahead, please. Yeah, please.
So maybe I'm putting multiple things together here, but Akshat, one of the things I heard from you is that it looks like students have more choices of classes that they can take. And Ranjan was also kind of mentioning that even parents want to micromanage. At what point do you find people kind of deciding on their career path? Is it like in their first year or second year? And the reason I'm asking is just to contrast. And in our batch, at least, I felt that most people till their third year were clueless about what they wanted to do in life. Some started getting that idea, and then fourth year, some people figured it out, and for others, it was, they just took the options that they got. So I was just curious if something has changed on that front.
No, I'd say it's pretty much the same. Like before third year, some people, like a very small fraction, might have a clue what they want to do. Like there are a lot. I mean, in terms of branch, most people who join physics are really interested in physics, and they probably have a clear view about what they want to do. I mean, it's just it's something which I've observed. But in general, people would probably be more aware of what they want to do or what all exists after their second year is over, or the third year has started or something like that. When the internship season and all begins, that's when they speak to a lot of seniors, try to evaluate the options. And the final call is probably after fourth year. Final in the sense that short-term final. In terms of what they really want to do, a lot of us, even the graduates, a lot of graduates might not really be able to say that this is what I want to do for life. So yeah, that's pretty much the same, I guess.
Thank you.
Sanjeet, you ready?
हाँ, या बिल्कुल.
चलो
तो
शुरू
कैमरा
करो.
ऑन करो. कैमरा ऑन
Yeah.
करता हूँ, ठीक है. और मुझे ऑनेस्ट फीडबैक देना कि कैसा लगा.
पहले बताओ तो ऐसे क्या है. I'll have to increase your.
दिख रहा है. I mean, speaker view ले लो अगर तो दिखेगा. If you take the speaker view, you may be able to see. टीचर हूँ ना, तो खड़े रह के ही बात करना अच्छा लगता है. बोलो, ये कैसा लगा लेकिन एनीवे सबको.
Very nice.
And ये हाँ तुमने तो बोल ही दिया, नॉस्टैल्जिया. So I really believe जेई से सबसे ज्यादा जो चीज ट्रिगर होगी हमारे लिए, that will anyway be nostalgia, and little bit of formulas, anything. I mean, studies and whatever we did, जेई के लिए जो मेहनत की थी and all that for all three subjects, मैं तो फिजिक्स का ही लिख पाया हूँ. And एक और चीज, if anyone remembers, let me check, ये कुछ याद आ रहा है इतना सच में? किसी को भी याद आ रहा है?
हाँ,
क्या है बताओ.
I can't see it well.
एंगुलर मोमेंटम होगा, मोमेंट ऑफ इनर्शिया होगा, और क्या वैसे कुछ लग रहा है?
नहीं, ये
This is
इतना
that
स्पाइडर वाली
rope,
प्रॉब्लम है अपनी, जो ये जेई में प्रॉब्लम आई थी.
rope
Yes.
hanging from rope
No,
hanging from
no. ये
table.
बहुत ब्यूटीफुल क्वेश्चन था हमारे जेई का. एक कीड़ा गिरता है और रॉड घूमने लगता है ना उधर.
एग्जैक्टली.
तो इसी सोचा थोड़ा डाल देते हैं. बोलो अनुराग, नाउ यू स्टार्ट ऑफ. बोलो.
So Sanjeet, we all know you. How did you get into IIT JEE coaching?
I was always passionate about physics actually. And मतलब जेई में भी जो ठीक ठाक मिला था वो फिजिक्स के थ्रू मिला था. मैथ्स केमिस्ट्री दोनों की मार्क्स मिला के भी फिजिक्स जितनी नहीं रही होगी मेरी. But then when I was coming out of IIT, that time contemplating a teaching type of job, वही था. अभी कुछ लोग वो रंजन बोल ही रहा था ना कि इंडिया में थोड़ा ऐसे ही था कि IIT से निकल के टीचिंग क्या करेगा टाइप. And then I was belonging to a very poor family. ऐसे कुछ आगे यूएस में जाके पढ़ना वढ़ना एकदम आउट ऑफ क्वेश्चन था. एनीवे मेरा कोई सीपीआई कलरफुल भी नहीं था, जा भी नहीं सकता था मोस्टली. आई जॉइंड महिंद्रा एंड महिंद्रा लिमिटेड, टुक अप अ टिपिकल मैकेनिकल इंजीनियरिंग जॉब. नेवर वाज इंटरेस्टेड इन एमबीए सॉर्ट ऑफ अ थिंग. मैंने कभी कैट एंट्रेंस कुछ दिया ही नहीं था. ऐसा थोड़ा ऐसा था कि मैथी वेटी से सीखा है, थोड़ा दाते सर से सीखा है, तो अपने करियर में लिपस्टिक क्या बेचने का या टाइटन की घड़ी क्या बेचने का, ऐसा था मन में. थोड़ा अमरनाथ सर ने डाला था, मेक वाले पीपल जानते होंगे. तो देन आई जॉइंड महिंद्रा महिंद्रा लिमिटेड. आई वाज एक्टिवली इन्वॉल्वड इन द रियर एक्सल एंड सस्पेंशन डिजाइन ऑफ दिस व्हीकल स्कॉर्पियो फ्रॉम 96 to 99. Yeah, James, actually I wanted to take EP, but hostel 2 में people will be remembering Chava, Smoggy, एक थे कुछ लोग. Chava was 1 year senior to me और उल्लासनगर का था, वो IIT में था. जेई के दिन भी मैं हॉस्टल 2 में रह के ही जेई दिया था. मैंने जब काउंसलिंग फॉर्म भर रहा था, मैंने ईपी ही भरा था एक्चुअली फर्स्ट चॉइस. जस्ट दे टोल्ड कि अबे ईपी में इंडिया में कुछ बहुत ज्यादा नहीं, तुझे रिसर्च करने बाहर जाना पड़ेगा, तू जा सकेगा. मैंने बस वही सोचा, अरे नहीं यार, अमेरिका वगैरह क्या सोच भी नहीं सकते उनके ये सब, तो फिर मेक ले ले, जॉब वॉब के लिए अच्छा होगा. बस मैंने एक्चुअली फॉर्म में कटवट करके साइन करके चेंज करके फिर से सबमिट किया वो कौन सा था, और रैंक ऐसा था कि ईपी भी मिल सकता था, मेक भी मिल सकता था, मेक मिल गया फिर ऑफकोर्स। तो ये एंड देन आफ्टर महिंद्रा आई मतलब 3 years हो गए एक्सेलेंस सस्पेंशन डिजाइन में। आई थॉट कि ये सॉफ्टवेयर ही सब जगह चल रहा है काइंड ऑफ, एंड महिंद्रा जैसी कंपनी में इट विल टेक वेरी लॉन्ग टू रीच अ सीनियर पोजीशन, ऐसे जनरल मैनेजर बनते बनते तो बुढ़ा ही हो जाऊंगा टाइप का। Everyone was rushing towards software, so I also made that change. I joined a company called PTC, Parametric Technology Corporation, in Pune, and that's how I came to Pune. July 99 में आया था, अभी पुणे का ही हो गया हूँ पूरा। Things were going on okay. 2000 में थोड़ा यूएस वगैरह जाके आया 6 महीने के लिए, शादी हो गई 99 में, 2001, 2, 3, 2 में बेटा हुआ, 3, 4 तक things were okay. But I used to really think कि अंडर द हुड्स क्या होता है सी प्लस प्लस में, पीछे जावा में क्या होता है। आई यूज्ड टू समटाइम्स ट्राई टू रीड दोस थिंग्स, बुक्स लेके बैठता था, कर्नेल प्रोग्रामिंग एंड ऑल दैट, नींद आती थी। एंड आई एम टेलिंग यू, मैं वो नींद भगाने के लिए वापस बियर एंड जॉनस्टन, क्लेपनर एंड कोलन को, फाउल्स एंड कैसिडे, थोड़ा एरोडो ऐसे लेके बैठता था वापस, और फिर 1-2 घंटा अच्छे से जागता था। Somewhere around 2004, I finally decided that I have to go to physics teaching. वही मेरा इनर कॉलिंग है। एंड that time अनुराग एक्चुअली थोड़ा जेई का कमर्शलाइजेशन, थोड़ा क्लासेस वासेस ये सब थोड़ा खुल भी गया था ना, ऐसा थोड़ा हमारे टाइम पे ऐसा था भी नहीं। हमने तो सिर्फ आइदर अग्रवाल क्लासेस या ब्रिलियंट ट्यूटोरियल्स का वो वाईजी फाइल, एलिट कोर्स, मोस्ट ऑफ अस तो उसी से आए थे एक्चुअली उसमें। एंड फ्यू ऑफ अस वुड हैव हैड सम कोचिंग, लाइक भिलाई पीपल हैड कोचिंग फ्रॉम श्रीनिवास मैडम, वेरी फ्यू पॉकेट्स यूज्ड टू रियली हैव some teacher teaching you for JEE. Like मेरे केस में, I never had a single second of a live person telling me anything about JEE. मैं तो अग्रवाल क्लास के correspondence course से आया था। So that market had opened up in post 2000 in Pune also. So I took that plunge कि JEE teaching आ जाएंगे physics में। So 2004 में आया, 2004 में preparation start की actually मैंने, and 2005 में आया। I take pride in saying this statement that I took my first lecture after a serious preparation of 14 months, and that preparation I'll say is around 3 to 4 hours of study every day, every single day, 14 months. फिर मैंने पहला लेक्चर लिया था अपना, तो बहुत पैशन से आया था इस लाइन में। 2005 से पूरा इसमें ही हो। अनुराग बोलो।
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question?
हाँ पूछ। या मंदार।
Yeah, why not physics teaching? Why just JEE teaching? Like, why not just go for physics teaching rather than JEE teaching?
कौन से स्टूडेंट्स को पढ़ाऊं? ये लेवल पे अगर मुझे पढ़ाना
कॉलेज और समथिंग,
फिर तो यार बहुत ही ज्यादा कॉम्प्रोमाइज हो जाएगा ना फाइनेंसेस में। इतनी भी मेरी जिंदगी जीनी नहीं थी मुझे। And also tell me,
so it's a trade-off of finances and
do you really think I'll get a physics teaching job in some good university in India just with a BTech degree? वो तो इनफैक्ट बोलेंगे तो मैक का है यार।
No, I don't think. I'm just trying to understand what is interesting about JEE physics. That's all.
JEE physics interest. See, I always wanted to remain in the basic physics domain, the high school physics domain, and high school physics domain में JEE एक थोड़ा ऐसा ड्राइवर तो है ना पीछे, एक फायर तो है कि people will want to learn at that higher level. May not be really out of their own interest, but just because of an exam sword hanging on their heads. So
okay,
that's why
Sanjeet, how has I'll ask questions now. Okay, let's keep them quick and to the point.
Right.
How has JEE changed since our time?
It has changed a lot. It has degraded, I will say.
What all has
objective? हाँ ठीक है। तो हमारे टाइम पे JEE कैसा था? You actually gave us training paper first day 9 to 12. Then you gave chemistry paper 2 to 5. The next day you gave physics paper again 9 to 12, 2 to 5. तो 3 घंटे के 3 पेपर 100 मार्क्स के दिए थे हमने। उसमें 20 मार्क्स ऑब्जेक्टिव था, रिमेनिंग 18 मार्क्स फॉर ऑल सब्जेक्टिव क्वेश्चंस। सब्जेक्टिव क्वेश्चंस रफली अराउंड 8 to 9 क्वेश्चंस, 8 मार्क्स ईच, तो 80 मार्क्स के 8-9 बिग क्वेश्चंस जो तुम लिखोगे एक्चुअली आंसर शीट में। Even if you write some partial correct steps, you will get set marks because a human being is checking it. And I know most of us को स्टेप मार्क्स ही मिली होगी तभी हम IIT में पहुंचे, राइट? बट अभी का एग्जाम कैसा हो गया, इट्स कंप्लीटली अ मशीन रीडेबल फॉर्मेट, 2006 से हो गया ये पूरा. It has become completely objective, machine readable, MCQ type an exam. Innovatively, still IIT has brought this format of integer type answer. So like your question answer finally कुछ तो MGL by 2 pi r square होगा, let's say 3 MGL by 2 pi r square, let's say. So they will write the question as the force can be shown as A MGL by B pi r square, where A and B are integers. Write A plus B. तब तुमको मशीन टाइप में ही 5 टिक करना है क्योंकि 3 plus 2000. So what has happened? The stress on accuracy has increased a lot, but then the benefit of partial marking have gone down. And also what has happened, now there are no blind answer questions. You don't have a question. You don't have this question and which asks you finally कि किस हाइट से गिरा था ये कीड़ा. आपका क्वेश्चन में क्या है? 4 ऑप्शन होंगी, इस साइड से, इस साइड से, इस साइड से, इस साइड से. I feel this is not the correct way of assessing because life कब हमको ऐसे ABCD ऑप्शन देती है, हमको सब कुछ ऐसे ग्रे ही होता है ना. And what has happened now because of this, training methodologies have also changed. JEE has become more trainable now compared to our years. So objective questions first change and too many questions. अब JEE कैसा होता है, there are 2 papers 3-3 घंटे के, you get physics chemistry maths का paper bundle directly together. You decide your 3 घंटे में तुम्हें क्या करना है. तो PCM साथ में मिला है 1-1 hour का एक एंड पेपर 2 भी ऐसे ही है, फिर से PCM साथ में मिला है उसी दिन थोड़ी देर के ब्रेक के बाद. बट इस 1 घंटे में कितने क्वेश्चन है पता है? 18 क्वेश्चन है. कैन यू इमेजिन कितने मिनट्स हो गए? 3 मिनट. तो तुमको अभी क्या मतलब मोरलेस ऐसा हो गया कि थोड़ा पता ही होना चाहिए कि कैसे करना है. तुम ऑन द स्पॉट थिंक करके थोड़ा हाफ बेक कुछ नहीं कर सकते सर. और हाफ बेक को एनीवे मार्क्स भी नहीं मिल रही है, मशीन रीडेबल है पूरा. That is why also it has become so trainable. And what happens is training methodology have changed. कि बस ये ऐसे कर ली, मतलब मैं तुझे बताऊंगा जेई कैसे क्रैक मारना है, इस तरह से जा सालों तक, 4-4 सालों तक, 9, 10, 11, 12 देखो रैंक मिल जाएगा. एंड मेजोरिटी प्लेसेस में थोड़ा ऐसा होता है कि नॉलेज गई बाद में, थोड़ा देखेंगे यार डीप थिंकिंग वगैरह बाद में देखेंगे, वो तू ये सब कर तेरे को रैंक आ जाएगा.
And how is JEE different from Olympiad, physics Olympiad?
Physics में it is still very near. See, maths Olympiad and JEE maths are very different because of the objective nature of the paper. In our time, I will say all the 3 Olympiads matched JEE to a greater extent. Now what has happened is maths is very much different. It is based on school geometry and non-calculus type syllabus, but physics still matches JEE ko. I will say first level को match करते. See, Olympiad has 3 levels of exams. First is called NACP, second is this Indian National Physics Olympiad, and then third is the actual international event where you go. The first level NACP is almost like a JEE, today ka JEE I will say, or slightly lesser than JEE level, whereas Info is हमारे time का JEE type का exam, subjective type का, because only 300-350 people in the country would be giving. In fact, I'll tell you, Ranjan का बेटा 7th in the country after this info evaluation. I mean, congrats बोलना चाहिए हम सबको इसकी वजह से. तो Olympiad में ये then what happens is in 300 में से they will select 30. These 30 will undergo a camp at TIFR, that is HBCSC, and then 5 will be selected to represent the country. But in physics and chemistry, you will still find that Olympiad medalists का JEE rank काफी अच्छा, एक 200 में आ ही जाएगा. मैथ्स में ऐसा नहीं मिलेगा. आई नो मेनी स्टूडेंट्स हु हैव मैथ्स ओलंपियाड से गोल्ड मेडल एंड ऑल, बट देयर जेईई रैंक्स आर 1200, 1600 उस रेंज का.
Okay. And so JEE coaching, what are the hotspots in India? Where is JEE coaching predominant right now? I remember it started from Kota.
Yes, so 2 very big broiler centers, I call them. Kota and Andhra, Hyderabad and थोड़ा विजयवाड़ा and all that, all because of that श्री चैतन्य and नारायणा, 2 बड़े giants है उधर साउथ में. So एक big hub है वहाँ पे, and कोटा है. इसको छोड़ के then there are smaller hubs like महाराष्ट्र side में नागपुर है, so it caters to the central part, जबलपुर, नागपुर and all that पूरा. Bombay and Pune are not that big JEE hubs as such speaking, so Nagpur is a very bigger hub. Delhi है एक big hub, थोड़ा अप नॉर्थ में चंडीगढ़ एंड लुधियाना है थोड़ा सा, देन इधर बिहार है एंड चेन्नई है. somehow I'll say कर्नाटका इज नॉट स्टिल अ जेई हब. हमारे टाइम पे भी थोड़ा कम ही था मुझे लगता है, अभी भी ऐसा टिपिकल जेई हब जैसा नहीं इधर. देन भुवनेश्वर भी है थोड़ा सा.
And how do you guys compete with these big guys? What does it take?
See, for small players, there is really a very tough competition, I'll say, because these big players, they have this concept of too many bankers batch, and one or two rankers batch. So like they will poach the students. उनको थोड़ा 9th-10th में ही देख लेंगे कि एनटीएससी किसको मिल रहा है, किसने ब्रेन मैपिंग एकेडमी के एग्जाम में अच्छा कुछ किया है. 9th क्या, आई विल से थोड़ा 6-7 से. तो 6-7 से थोड़ा अच्छे वाले एकेडमिक बेंट वाले स्टूडेंट्स को पकड़ लो. उनको मतलब उल्टा है, दे विल नॉट चार्ज फीस, दे विल गिव देम सम मनी, they will shift them to Kota or Hyderabad or wherever their centers are. In fact, they will shift them with their parents and उनका भी खर्चा उठा लेंगे पूरा. और then उनको रख के they will give them good teaching, of course, because they are big classes, so they do also have money to afford good teachers. तो मतलब अच्छे नॉलेज वाले, अच्छे जेई डिलीवरी वाले टीचर्स, तो अच्छा प्रोग्राम दे भी देंगे वैसे तो, of course. But I will say this is a very not illegal, of course, but somewhat unethical or not so good practice, because what is happening is genuinely कोई छोटा प्लेयर अच्छा करना चाह रहा है, उसको बहुत कंपटीशन हो रहा है इसके कारण, क्योंकि उसने मनी माइट में अच्छे बच्चे ले ही लिए हैं. अब ये जेन्युइन छोटा प्लेयर थोड़ा अच्छे लेवल पे कुछ करना चाह रहा है, उसको वैसे स्टूडेंट्स नहीं मिल पा रहे हैं. फिर अभी थोड़ा टफ तो होता ही है. somehow I have been lucky, I'll say. A big factor has been Pune because of that. somehow थोड़ा पुणे में कंजर्वेटिव सा टिपिकल मराठी that mindset we can say है कि थोड़ा चांगलं शिकायला पाहिजे. एंड आई डोंट नो, मराठी सबको नहीं आ रही होगी. अच्छा सीखना चाहिए, थोड़ा डेप्थ में सीख के जाना चाहिए, थोड़ा टीचर का नाम वाम देख के क्लासेस ज्वाइन करने की कोशिश करेंगे. And that's where there are a few good places in Pune who give good maths foundation. So somehow my business runs as a subset of them, and I've been able to create this scene that the kind of maths you get there, if you're looking for that kind of deep physics, you join me. So I run actually as a very small boutique shop, I can say, where I actually take very selected, filtered, थोड़े अच्छे वाले good appetite वाले students.
How much effort it takes from your side, Sanjeet, to keep upgrading your skills?
It was there earlier, I will say. When I entered this line, slowly it has reduced, right? See, because what happens is like 2-3 batches to padhate hoonge every year. So like I'm teaching mechanics, electromagnetism, modern physics, heat and thermal physics at that JE level for 2-3 times a year, 2-3 batches a year, and this I've been doing for the last 15 years. So initial 5-6 years was really, I used to spend a lot of time preparing my notes, selecting good questions, and going through good books and upgrading myself. Last few years में it's only some new question इस बार जेई में पूछ लिया था कुछ अच्छा थोड़ा सा उसके बारे में, and few international Olympiads like Asian Olympiad, Boston area undergraduate physics competition, या कनाडा का पॉप्टर प्रोग्राम होता है टोरंटो यूनिवर्सिटी का. So few universities में क्या क्या क्वेश्चन नए कुछ आए हैं क्या, थोड़ा उसके लिए it has reduced a lot still. But I do study थोड़ा बहुत before every lecture, just to have my language clear, right? Like dielectric theory पे lecture है तो एक बार ग्रिफिथ खोल के देखता जरूर, just ऐसे, so that वो language create हो जाती है mind में.
Have you got people of the caliber, जैसे अपने बैच में I remember Ruya mid semester 15 मिनट में करके he left, and while we were still doing the first question. Do you get people like that?
I do get, because somehow मैंने बोला, मैंने पुणे में ऐसे थोड़ा बनाया है कि संजीत सर थोड़ा तीखी बिरयानी बनाने वाले टीचर हैं, हर किसी के बस की बात नहीं है, तीखा खा सकता है तो ये आएगा. So like I told you, one of my student Advait Godbole 2016 में, he was 7th highest in the country in physics, 102 marks he got out of 120. In chemistry he got 80. In maths he got only 62, though he was a INMO qualified maths Olympiad candidate. So he used to really sometimes trouble me. मतलब I remember scenes where अद्वैत ने अगर ऐसे सर क्लास में ऐसा किया तो मेरी एक हार्ट बीट मिस हो जाती थी थोड़ी। अरे बाप रे, अद्वैत ने हाथ उठाया, अभी आधा घंटा अटक जाएगा क्लास पूरा, क्यों कुछ तो डाउट पूछ लेता था और अटका देता था। But still I enjoyed it. Every year I get such students. At the same time, I'll tell you, I have this policy at my academy that if any student gets more than 80% in any test set by me, I give them a treat wherever. I mean, JW Merit tells me. This Advait, in his 2 years, he got that treat 8 times out of 20 tests what he gave. तो मिलते हैं, मुझे तो मिलते हैं every year. And they only make me learn. मतलब उसके कारण ही मैं ऐसा बन गया हूँ इस तरह के. It was actually, I'll say, both ways था कि मैंने जिद रखी थी कि नहीं अच्छे ही लेवल पे पढ़ाना है, एकदम ओलंपियाडी स्टाइल में, अपने टाइम के जेई को याद रख के पढ़ाना है डेप्थ में, अभी के जेई के हिसाब से नहीं करना है एबीसीडी टाइप का, ऑप्शन टाइप का. तो वो रखा मैंने किया, तो मिलते भी गए स्टूडेंट्स, मैंने भी जिद रखी और मैं भी सीखते गया उनके साथ इंप्रूव होते गया.
So has the JEE curriculum also changed? JEE का syllabus change हुआ है from our times to now?
Yeah, few topics add हुए हैं. जैसे हमारे टाइम पे सरफेस टेंशन टॉपिक जेई में नहीं था, विस्कोसिटी नहीं थी इतना, थोड़ा ऐसे कॉम्पटन इफेक्ट वगैरह के ऊपर कुछ नहीं आता था, नॉन यूनिवर्सल फ्रेम्स में कोरोली सोर्स वगैरह नहीं होता था हमारे टाइम पे. अभी ये सब थोड़ा ऐड हो जाता है इसमें. See, now there is a concept of comprehension based questions in JEE, which is a good concept, I'll say, where they give you a small paragraph. Sometimes they try to teach you something new there, and based on that, 2-3 sub part छोटे questions होंगे. So even though let's say Coriolis course is not there technically in this syllabus, they will give a writer, they will teach कि in every non-inertial frame ऐसे होता है and all that, and फिर 2-3 छोटे questions होंगे उसपे, तो immediately check कि सिखाए जाने पे catch कर रहा है कि नहीं.
And JEE is still paper and pen, or is it a digital exam?
No. From 2018, it has become a completely computer-based test.
Completely computerized?
Online test.
Okay. Right.
Till 2017, it was a paper pen exam. But then the preparation nowadays, I'll tell you, serious preparation इसका start हो जाता है in many places, from 7th, 8th standard. That is really a worry, जैसे
whole JEE or only certain like maths or physics?
JEE, the PCM, तीन subjects.
So what they go to a hostel? They go to a hostel and start studying for JEE, is it?
In hub places, so yes, they go to hostel. See, I was a visiting faculty at Sri Chaitanya Institute in Hyderabad for 6 months in 2012 to 13 time frame. What I really saw there is, they have all this jail type buildings where ऊपर के कुछ फ्लोर्स में हॉस्टल्स होंगे, नीचे के 2 फ्लोर्स में 11th और 12th के क्लासरूम्स होंगे. स्टूडेंट्स उधर ही हैं पूरा टाइम, सिर्फ संडे पेरेंट आके 2 घंटा मिल सकता है उनसे. Morning 6:30 the hostel gate will be closed. You have to come out of that. नहीं तो 6:30 के बाद आ नहीं सकते नीचे. गेट क्लोज होगा, वो सिर्फ रात को ओपन होगा. बाकी पूरा टाइम तुम ये रात को कब 10:30 को ओपन होगा. 6:30 you come to your floor, you keep on attending lecture, practice session, lecture, practice session, lecture, practice session. रात में जाओ, फिर डिनर, बीच में लंच डिनर ब्रेक टाइम्स हैं, बट एसेंशियली दे आर like घिस रहे हैं for 12 hours at least. This happens for 4 to 5 years of their life, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And these are mostly, many of them are not actual Hyderabad city students. They are from Warangal, Khammam, they are from interior areas, Guntur. वहां से आए हैं, वहां के थोड़े अच्छे बच्चे हैं, 6-7 तक टैप किया है उनको, देखा है कि अच्छे हैं लोग. उनको ये प्रॉमिस दे के लाया गया है कि तुमको हम ऐसे सिस्टम में डालेंगे चटनी बनाने की पूरी, 4 साल चटनी बनाएंगे. हाँ, लेकिन एंड में देखो अच्छा 200-300 में रैंक आने वाला है जी. So
but do they not burn out after JEE?
Very well. In fact, हमारे यहाँ एक स्टूडेंट है अभी, अक्षत को मैं क्वेश्चन करना चाहूंगा कि ये जो फैक्ट्री से आए हुए टॉपर्स हैं, स्पेशली आंध्रा साइड, आई विल स्टिल से के वाला कोटा थोड़ा बेटर है, थोड़ा कोटा में थोड़ा तो डेप्थ में बेटर पढ़ाया जाता है. बट ये जो हैदराबाद और इस साइड में चल रहा है, बिल्कुल रट प्रैक्टिस ऑफ जेई चल रहा है बस. मतलब जेई अगर हमारे टाइम का सब्जेक्टिव जैसा हो गया ना, इमीडिएटली उनके रिजल्ट डाउन होने वाले हैं. कोटा के फिर भी डाउन नहीं होंगे. तो ये लोग जो अंदर आते हैं ना, एकदम टॉप रैंक्स लेके आते हैं, पूरा गुल्टी गैंग. क्या ये लोग अंदर अच्छा करते हैं? ये लोग पीएसएम और पीजीएम मारते हैं? ये लोग आगे बहुत अच्छा करते हैं? मैंने खुद एक स्टूडेंट को पढ़ाया था, रैंक 1 था 2013 का. बाद में बहुत अच्छा कुछ नहीं कर रहा था इतना खास। एंड दैट डजंट मीन कि हमारे टाइम के सारे वंस अच्छे ही थे, बट हमारे टाइम के रैंक वंस में से कोई एक भी दिखा सकते हो क्या जो कॉम्प्रोमाइज्ड था थोड़ा सा भी, जो बर्नआउट हो गया था अंदर आके? था क्या कोई ऐसा? अक्षत तुम आंसर कर सकते हो, आई डोंट नो यू आर देयर और नॉट, मोबाइल पे मुझे दिख नहीं रहा है अभी पार्टिसिपेंट्स।
Yep, I'm here, Sanjeev. Yeah, I mean, I guess, I mean, to some extent, this is true that rote learning ke through JEE wala jo point hai, it kind of definitely, I mean, the performance in institute is quite different from what people would have ranked. It's not entirely different, but I mean,
Right.
some mix-up is there, and probably that's because of the thing which you mentioned, right? That a lot of rote learners come in, but and the objective subjecting thing is very true. Like even I was checking papers right now. You won't believe people will get the right answer by all the random methods, but it's not
बिल्कुल,
really.
they are taught that way. That's what I told, जेई ट्रेनेबल है। They are taught कि भाई देख तेरे पास ये एबीसीडी आ गया, थोड़ा इस एनालिसिस से डी तो हो ही नहीं सकता है, अब क्या एबीसी, अभी 33% प्रोबेबिलिटी तो नहीं है किसी भी आंसर की, तो उसमें थोड़ा कुछ करघुरा के एक आध रिस्क ले लिया कैलकुलेटेड, 3-4 रिस्क ले लिए, तो उसमें एक तो फिर भी लग जाएगा, तो 2 में नेगेटिव मार्क लेके भी 1 में पॉजिटिव मार्क मिल गई है। You know, all these marking strategies are taught in coaching classes. I mean, फिजिक्स एंड मैथ्स कम और ये सब ज्यादा, मतलब मैं बोल रहा हूँ ना थोड़ा, मैं पूरे कॉल में नेगेटिव साउंड कर रहा हूँ, आई नो दैट, बट है बस दिल से बाहर आ रहा है वो सब। थोड़ा ऐसा हो ही गया है अभी, यू नो, कि योर गुड जेई रैंक is your dream, of course, but it is also the dream of a coaching class, of a big crores का business setup on it. इसीलिए वो तुम्हारे पीछे पड़ा रहता है कि मैं जो बोल रहा हूँ उतना ही कर, तेरे को रैंक चाहिए ना, नॉलेज गई थोड़ा खड्डे में, तुझे रैंक से मतलब है, मैं बताता हूँ वो कर, और ये चल जाता है आज के जेई में, क्योंकि वो एग्जाम का नेचर ऐसा है। आई एम श्योर हमारे टाइम के जेई में ऐसा नहीं हो सकता था, इतना ऐसे प्रेडिक्टेबल रैंक सिस्टम नहीं था हमारे।
What about distribution of coaching between cities and towns and villages? Where is it? Is it still not democratized?
नहीं, नॉट सो मच, आई विल से बिग सिटीज में अच्छी है, अभी थोड़ा मिडिल सिटीज में टीयर 2 में भी है, बट विलेजेस एंड ऑल नीचे तो अभी भी लैकिंग नहीं है सब। लाइक इफ यू कंसीडर, आई कीप गोइंग टू दिस प्लेस दापोली, रत्नागिरी में, अभी वहां तो ढंग का जेई नहीं है कुछ भी, मतलब जेई कोचिंग तो वहां के बच्चे को नहीं मिलेगा, एंड स्कूल्स में तो ये टाइप की चीजें हैंडल ही नहीं होने वाली है स्कूल टीचर से। So at the same time, though there is always a narrative, you know, in paper and all that from IIT people also, IIT dignitaries and education people and politicians की कोचिंग क्लासेस ने तो पूरा माहौल खराब कर दिया है देश का। बट मैं फिर ये भी क्वेश्चन करूंगा, क्या तुम्हारे कॉलेज के और इंस्टीट्यूशन के टीचर्स ये लोगों का एक भी क्वेश्चन सॉल्व करके दिखा सकते हैं हमारे 12th के बच्चों को? मेरे अद्वैत को पढ़ा सकता है कोई कॉलेज का टीचर 11th-12th का? वो तो हम प्राइवेट वाले ही पढ़ा रहे हैं पूरा, फिर एग्जाम भी घटिया सेट करते हो, खुद पढ़ाते भी नहीं अच्छा, और उनको गाली भी देते हो कि कोचिंग वालों ने माहौल खराब कर दिया। अजीब हो चुका है ये पूरा।
What about boys versus girls? Is the ratio of girls increasing?
Yes, it has increased. I'll say for both the reasons. You know, because of coaching, it has increased. I mean, pre-girl reservation, I think girl reservation fund has started from Chetrali 2018 से start हुआ है, right? अक्षय 2017 में भी नहीं था, 18 से start हुआ है। तो prior to 2017 also I'll say थोड़ा सा increase तो था ही girls में, because of this coaching thing again. At least cities में girls used to get some good coaching and they used to crack JEE. So from our time, surely it has increased in the 2005 to 2015 time frame, I can say, due to coaching. And then 2017-18 onwards, due to this reservation also, it has increased a little bit. Abhi, I think so, 1/5 to hoga hi, more or less.
20%. That's nice, man. That's very good.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We are at the end game now. So a few quick questions. What do you want to change? If you could, what would you change in JEE?
Make it subjective, make it like 90s. दे में से इतने लोगों का पेपर कैसे चेक करेंगे? मैं कहूंगा 10 लाख लोग जेई मेंस लिखते हैं, 2 लाख को क्यों फिल्टर करना है उसमें से? 1.25 लाख को क्यों नहीं फिल्टर कर सकते हैं एडवांस के लिए? और 1.25 लाख पेपर हम 10 IITs में क्यों नहीं दे सकते हैं? ऑन एन एवरेज 10-12 हजार पेपर चेक करने हैं एक महीने में, क्यों नहीं चेक कर सकता? हमारे टाइम पे वैसे ही था, हमारे टाइम पे IIT बॉम्बे ने सेट किया था, हमको बोला गया था कि स्क्रीनिंग में से 25,000 पेपर लिए जाएंगे, हम अराउंड 1 लाख लोगों ने 1.25 लाख लोगों ने जेई दिया था, 2400 तक रैंक्स मिले थे, 25,000 पेपर चेक करके, एक ही IIT ने किया था। आज 7 मेन IITs तो है ही, टॉप 5 एंड रुड़की एंड गुवाहाटी, हैदराबाद, गांधीनगर, इंदौर, दे आर ऑल्सो लाइक थोड़ा सेटल्ड IITs हो गए हैं, they can be brought into the JEE stream, make it subjective, or at least if possible, ये तो ड्रीम ही है, why can't we have 2:1, 2 times the number of seats selected from JEE and a small interview conducted at zonal IIT levels to check उस स्टूडेंट का थोड़ा acumen कैसा है। पता नहीं, प्रैक्टिकली मुश्किल होगा, सब्जेक्टिव तो कर सकते हैं उसको। One more thing I had only proposed through some alumni chapter some years back is there is a mad rush. Arunag, if you remember, हमारे टाइम पे कॉम्प साइंस कहाँ तक चला था रैंक वाइज? मुझे याद है स्वप्निल शाह मेरा PTC का कलीग है, आई थिंक 200 समथिंग उसका JEE रैंक था, 180 तो कुछ तो पक्का ही था उसका रैंक, वो भी IIT बॉम्बे कॉम्प साइंस का था। अब IIT बॉम्बे कॉम्प साइंस क्या रैंक पे क्लोज होता है? अबाउट 65, जनरल कैटेगरी, ओपन की बात कर रहा हूँ। सीट्स कितनी है उसमें? अराउंड 50-55, 50 to 55 सीट्स ऑफ IIT बॉम्बे कॉम्प साइंस, ऑल इंडिया रैंक 65 पे। मेरा इस 2020 का 66 रैंक स्टूडेंट इज द लास्ट राउंड में उसको एडमिशन मिल गई, क्योंकि एक बच्चा MIT निकल गया, वरना उसको नहीं मिल रहा था प्रीवियस राउंड में। डू यू थिंक IIT बॉम्बे इतना कुछ खतरनाक कर रहा है कंपेयर टू IIT कानपुर कि यहाँ 60 रैंक में क्लोज हो जाता है? You know what has happened?
उसका तो दूसरा reason I've heard, we can ask Akshat to confirm. IIT Bombay is considered a good school for an all-round development now. That's why a lot of people come here. It's not just about academics. It's not only about academics. नहीं, city का भी नहीं है. This is all about, Tech Fest is very big. Some people like the flexibility of curriculum. So what I've heard is that the overall offering.
See, flexibility of curriculum कानपुर में भी है. कॉम्प साइंस रियली कुछ करना है तो कानपुर इज रियली गिविंग अ गुड प्रोग्राम इन कॉम्प साइंस. इट यूज्ड टू गिव सिंस आवर टाइम्स.
अरे बाबा, हमारे टाइम में कानपुर क्लोज होता था ऐसे.
एग्जैक्टली, कानपुर एकदम ऐसा टॉप रैंक पे.
कानपुर के पीछे पागल क्यों थे लोग, मुझे मालूम नहीं.
लेकिन सुनो, अभी उससे ज्यादा मैं बोलता हूँ क्या हुआ है. ये मैड रश ऑफ सिलेक्टिंग द डिपार्टमेंट जस्ट फ्रॉम JEE रैंक पर्सपेक्टिव, जब कुछ पता ही नहीं होता बच्चे को. एक तो वो इनिशियली फिजिक्स, केमिस्ट्री, मैथ्स में बहुत अच्छा है, मतलब JEE के 3 सब्जेक्ट में अच्छा है, इसलिए रैंक मार के आ रहा है. वो रियल मैथ्स में अच्छा है, कॉम साइंस में डिस्क्रीट है पूरा, उसको कुछ और ही मिलने वाला है वहां जाके, उसको पता भी नहीं है. शायद वो फिजिक्स में भी बहुत ज्यादा अच्छा है, रैंक अच्छा मार रहा है.
Just to play the
सोसाइटी प्रेशर है.
Just to play the devil's advocate, Sanjit, just to play the devil's advocate, it was true in our times also. There were so many people who came through JEE but didn't have the aptitude for engineering. So I think वो सब रहता ही है.
हाँ, तो अब इतने सालों के बाद अगर हमें ये पता पड़ा कि ऐसा होता है, तो ऐसा क्यों नहीं कर सकते हैं कि फर्स्ट ईयर में कॉमन कोर्स सबको दे दो, JEE रैंक पे सिर्फ उसका IIT डिसाइड कर दो, ज्योग्राफी बॉम्बे, दिल्ली, कानपुर. फर्स्ट ईयर में कॉमन कोर्स देके उसका JEE, थोड़ा सा फर्स्ट ईयर का ओरिएंटेशन एंड फर्स्ट ईयर का मार्क्स देख के सेकेंड ईयर में अलॉट करो उसका डिपार्टमेंट. ऐसा क्यों नहीं कर सकते? आई नो सो मेनी पीपल, आई टेल यू ऑफ माय स्टूडेंट्स, जो ना उल्टा पुल्टा रहता है, मतलब JEE अच्छे से मैनेज नहीं कर पाए और बहुत अच्छा एक्यूमेंट रहता है उनका किसी एक पर्टिकुलर फील्ड के लिए, वो मिला नहीं रहता है. अभी थोड़ा ये माइनर की फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी आई है, मैं बीच का पीरियड बोल रहा हूँ. उस बीच के पीरियड में वो लॉस्ट ही हो गए कि मुझे करना कुछ और था सर, मिला ही नहीं, मुझे तो मेटलर्जी मिला, मुझे ये करना ही नहीं था. रैंक थोड़ा सटक गया, मेटलर्जी मिला, वो लॉस्ट ही रह गया 4 साल. काउंसलिंग सेशंस करने पड़ती हैं. उल्टा भी देखा है. चित्रांग मुरडिया 2014 JEE रैंक 1 ड्यू टू पेरेंटल प्रेशर तो IIT बॉम्बे कॉम्प साइंस, विद इन 6 months निकल गया, वो MIT चले गया, प्योर फिजिक्स प्रेशर. मेरा ही स्टूडेंट 2015 का रैंक 56, JEE रैंक 1 था मेंस में, पेरेंटल प्रेशर से इलेक्ट लिया, उधर जाके EP में शिफ्ट मारा, अभी कोलोराडो बोल्डर में प्योर फिजिक्स में कुछ तो कर रहा है. तो थोड़ा ऐसा देयर आर दीस थिंग्स जो करना चाहिए मेरे हिसाब से IIT सिस्टम में कुछ तो. एज मंदार हैड मेंशन्ड, UG एजुकेशन रियली बहुत ज्यादा प्रायोरिटी रही नहीं है IIT की, मुझे तो ऐसा ही लगता है.
You are absolutely right. Okay, nobody wants to.
There is a professor London. Okay. I forgot. He exactly is talking about that, right? So UG education priority.
Nobody wants
but
to.
Nandan, why? What is the reason for that?
I told you, this dual degree program is working, very well for us. So they're very serious people, serious students in that program, and we normally would like to pay more attention to that program than the BTECs. And it's a clear demarcation. These people, we don't even offer them BTP. Okay, they also don't want probably. And they just want to go out with a BTEC and go into something else. So we don't. So here, because the pressure now is on performing through research. Okay, for most of the faculty, they're also wanting to cut down on their load. So it's working both ways, and there are a lot of opportunities available, I guess, and it works both ways. So